My name is Keith, and from the time I was about 4 years old, I was interested in being a part of the entertainment business. And I've done many things throughout that time, from singing in bands, writing music, hosting television shows, everything involved in the professional wrestling business. And I've written comic books, done a lot of things, and almost all of those things failed in some way or another. But I still kept going. I still wanted to continue to create. And there's just something in me that drives me to create. And I started thinking, what is it that drives anyone to create? And that's going to be the point of this podcast. We're going to talk to people from all aspects of the entertainment industry. We're going to find out what made them interested in creating art, and why, when faced with success, when faced with failure, the ups and downs of life and life in the entertainment business, they continue to create. So, and hopefully we'll have some good and interesting conversations along the way that you'll be interested in hearing. So tune in to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, Keith, and today we are joined by a man who has pretty much held every job in the professional wrestling business. He has also transitioned into a very successful podcaster while continuing to hold jobs in the wrestling business. We are here with Sign Guy. Sign Guy, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Keith. Always happy to talk to you.
Definitely. We've never met in person, but we've known each other for over a decade. Through the internet and through mutual friends and stuff. So I think we have a pretty good relationship, and yeah, I like talking to you as well. So
you've come close a couple times.
Yeah, we have. You've been in Indiana and I couldn't get a ride, and then I was gonna book you for Our Lady's show, which didn't even happen, so it's unfortunate.
Didn't happen yet.
Yeah. It could still go down, man. So I don't know how much you know about our podcast, but what we like to do is we like to talk to creative people and just get an insight into their creative journey. So, basically, when did you know that you wanted to get involved in the wrestling business?
I had a bit of a different path. They sort of brought me into the business slowly, so I was just sort of brought into it. I wouldn't necessarily say I made a conscious decision, hey, I'm getting into the business. They started giving me little spots here and there to do, and I did it, and then they would give me something else a little more, and before I knew it, I was in.
Awesome. And where did you start at?
Hoosier Pro Wrestling in Columbus, Indiana.
Okay, and that was Jerry Wilson down there?
Yes,
okay.
It was.
Okay, and for those of you who don't know, Jerry Wilson, like many people, started out as a photographer down in Mid-South and moved to the Indiana area and started his own promotion, Hoosier Pro Wrestling, and it was a very respected, long-running independent wrestling company here in Indiana. Dice Man Ronnie Vegas and the High Rollers were down there for quite a while, and they burst on the national scene in the 90s and early 2000s, which was a pretty cool thing. So when you first started out in the business, was there people who took you under their wing and kind of taught you the ins and outs, or was it just kind of a learning as you go type of thing on your own? How did that work out?
A little of both, but I had a lot of people that helped me. Jerry Wilson, of course, the aforementioned Dice Man Ronnie Vegas and the High Rollers. Ox Harley was a big help. A lot of people would help me out when I was starting out and give me feedback or tell me how things worked or whatever the case may be. But a lot of it I had to sort of learn on the job and hope it worked out when I did it. And a lot of times it did.
Right. So Ox Harley, man, he is quite a character. His Facebook posts are something else, man. I remember before I came out here to Indiana,
he had quite a reputation from his time in Puerto Rico and all that sort of stuff. What was your what is your personal experience with Ox like? What was he like as far
Ox
as
is
your dealings with?
he's a crazy guy. Everybody's got an Ox Harley story, of course, but I wrestled Ox quite a few times in tag matches, and he was always very, very giving. He would not just eat me up and spit me out like he could have, like a lot of people would if he helped me out. I actually pinned Ox in one match, even, and he had
Wow.
no qualms about that. And he was very, very patient with me, knew I was green, and we
Right.
get along very, very well to this day. Ox got his life together a little bit. He was dealing with a lot of things at one point in time and had some troubles, but he's gotten past that and has a successful promotion of his own in Tennessee
Oh,
and
really?
is helping raise his daughter and doing pretty well now.
Good for Ox. That's awesome. Yeah, I remember when I got here, there was quite a few Ox Harley was drunk at the show stories. So
The
he did.
the funny ha ha that the boys used to say was, if Ox isn't drunk, you don't want to work with him because he'll potato you. And it was
Right.
a funny ha ha, but it actually was true. He told me that he was used to aiming for the guy in the middle. And so if he
Done.
didn't have that, it would throw off his timing and his balance, and he would just start throwing live rounds at people.
Oh man.
He didn't mean to do
So
that, but
yeah,
because he didn't have that like fifth of whiskey in him to show him three people, he didn't know
he
which
didn't know
one of
which one to
them.
hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Um, so did you start out as a manager? Was that
Essentially, yeah. I
okay?
would slip stuff to Dice Man Ronnie Vegas, who would hit whoever he was wrestling, usually Bobo Brazil Jr. or Deputy Dog. And I was sort of an unofficial manager. And then later on, they used me in a more official role whenever I was in town to help them out. But that
Okay.
was essentially my first role, was doing that.
Now, how did you live in Washington or were you out here in Indiana and then you moved to Washington? Like how did that all happen?
I was originally from Indiana, moved to Washington, and when I moved back for about a year and a half, we started going to HPW, and that's how I got into it. They started using me a little bit here, a little bit there, and
Gotcha.
proceeded from that.
Yeah, because it seems like you've got a lot of roots out here, and I always wondered how that happened. Like, there's a ton of people out here who have a lot of respect for you and love, and with you being based in Washington, I was wondering how you got so deep into the Midwest. I never really knew that, so that's pretty cool.
A lot of
Um,
times it's the opposite because a lot of Portland guys ended up in Louisville when
sure,
OVW was running. Uh,
yeah,
Buddy Wayne, the Northwest Buddy Wayne, Nick Wayne's dad, was tight
yeah,
with Rip Rogers, and so he would send people to Rip Rogers to use. So that's why a lot of guys cross from Pacific Northwest over to the Midwest.
sure. And they're not involved in the business anymore, but Dash Venture and Lila Lodge came down here from the Pacific Northwest and had a lot of success in this area for for
They
several
did.
years. Um,
Dash came back last year,
okay.
wrestled a handful of times, and then nobody's seen him since. He'll pop up like every couple 3 years, do
Yeah.
a handful of matches, and then he's done for a while.
Yeah. Dash and I have set up bookings a couple of times, and it always seems like right before I'm getting ready to bring him out, he disappears. Like we'll set up a booking a couple months in advance and we'll be talking back and forth. And then a week or two before he's supposed to come down, I can't find him. That's happened
I
at least
think
twice. So but I love Dash. He's such a great guy, man. And I hope wherever he is right now, he's doing well. It's a
he was
very
doing
good
pretty
guy.
well when we saw him last year. He definitely doesn't want to wrestle full time anymore, but
Sure.
he wrestles a handful of times, and then once he's got it out of his system and scratched the itch, he goes back into hiding and then
Yeah.
doesn't pop up until he's ready.
I remember Dash sent me a picture one time where he had built a throne out of snow and ice in his backyard, and he
Yeah,
was sitting in it. And I was like, man, you have to use that as a promo picture. I was like, that is a freaking promo picture right there. It was awesome. I don't have the talent or the patience to do something like that, but it looked so cool.
yeah, I've seen that picture. It was at he and Lila's place in Western Washington.
Yeah, it looked amazing. Um, so once you so you mentioned working with Bobo Brazil Jr. and Diceman Ronnie Vegas. They are both pretty legendary wrestlers. Were you nervous at all working with them? Like, what was that experience like? How did
I can't say nervous per se because I started out. Dice would shoot me the look. I'd slip him the gimmick. He'd use the gimmick. So my involvement was sort of limited. But when I started getting more and more responsibility, especially when I was actively in the matches, I was just hoping I wasn't going to screw anything up in it.
right?
And I knew Dice and Bo were professional enough to fix it if I did without me even knowing it. So
Yeah.
I knew I was
That
in good hands with them.
yeah, that's one thing that I always used to tell kids. Like they'd be working with would say Cody Hawk. I got this actually twice from guys working with Cody Hawk, and they would be so nervous working with him. I would just be like, man, you are working with one of the best wrestlers in the world. Like, he will fix whatever's wrong. I was like, you shouldn't be nervous working with somebody who's great. You should be nervous working with somebody who maybe needs more help. You know, if you want to have a good match, you're gonna have it with Cody Hawk. You know,
For sure.
and that's what I used to try to explain to the two guys. I'm not gonna mention any names, but there were two people who were very nervous. One of them actually asked me for advice. He was like, "I'm working with Cody Hawk this weekend. I'm so nervous. What should I do?" And I was like, "Man, have the best match of your life," basically. And then the other guy was actually on my show, and Cody noticed that he was really really nervous, so I went over and talked to him a little bit, but he just didn't want to screw up. And I get that everybody gets in their head, but especially in the wrestling business, you got to trust the veterans. Like I think that's where a lot of kids go wrong nowadays. They think they know everything and they don't trust the veterans as much as they used to.
We get that a lot out here. Out here, if somebody comes in and they're a veteran or they're off TV, the local guys instantly think I'm going to screw up and they're going to shoot on me,
Yeah.
which is not something that the veteran or guy off TV's considered in their head at all.
Right.
But the local guys just automatically think, well, I've messed this up. They're going to get mad and beat me up for real. I'm thinking, what purpose would that serve to
Right.
anybody?
Nothing. Yeah.
It's never once been something where a veteran came in and just shot on a local guy, but for some reason the mentality here is if I screw up, that's the penalty for it.
Right.
So yeah, I get
It's a
what you're
weird
saying.
mindset, but
It really is. I
yeah.
know when legendary Larry D came out here to Washington, he wrestled a guy, and the
Yeah.
guy made a really minor mistake. And as he's laying on the mat, he's like, I'm going to be in a real fight now. I'm going to be in a real fight now. I said, what's wrong? And he said, oh, I messed something up, Larry. He's going to shoot on me when we get backstage.
Right.
I said, why would Larry D shoot on you? He said, I made a mistake. I said, I'm
It's
pretty
not how it
positive
works.
he's not mad at all.
Yeah.
And when we got up there, Larry D said, why would I shoot on anybody for making a mistake in a professional wrestling match?
Right. Right. I mean, it happens. Um, so you transitioned from the management position into a wrestling position. Was that the next step?
I did a lot. I did ring announcing. I did um I think yeah, managing and ring announcing, and then I wrestled, and then I did a bunch of other stuff after that too. So
Okay.
pretty much like
Well,
you said earlier, I did a little of
did pretty much
everything.
everything. Yeah. Have you ever ran your own promotion or booked? Like that was the one thing that I wasn't sure if you've ever been a part of, but
Never ran my own promotion. I've helped people with booking a little bit here and there if they needed it, but nothing ever where I was like the full-time paid booker type of thing.
Sure. Is that something you'd be interested in, or are you good with just assisting and having your spot on the show?
I mean, I might run like a one-off just to say I've done it and have that experience, but nothing
Yeah.
I would want to sit down and have 50 guys every week saying, "Hey, brother, have you got a spot?"
Oh man.
Dealing with
Yeah.
all that. Plus, it's really hard in Washington because of the way the commission is set up. We
Sure.
have staggered types of licensing here. So you have your
Okay.
full-time professional wrestling license, which has been around since like the 30s,
Right.
and you have to have an ambulance, you have to have EMTs that are paid by the hour, you have to have insurance, you have to have bonds. It's $1,000 license. Then there's what is called a theatrical license, which
Right.
is a pro wrestling show attached to a wrestling school. But on the show, you have to have 60% students. And
Gotcha.
so most of your card has to be wrestling students. You just can't pick the best guys out there,
Right.
but show. There's also what they call an amateur professional wrestling license, and a
Okay.
promoter can run that for the least amount of money, but nobody on his card can have ever earned more than $50 to have wrestled. So
Wow.
when you get into that, you're using rookies and guys that are like just around and don't care if they get paid or not because they're
Sure.
5 minutes away or whatever.
Right. I would think that the shows where it's 50% students would draw pretty well though,
They
because
That's the
most of,
most common show.
yeah, most of
Uh,
the student shows that I've ever gone to, that's when their whole family's coming out, and everybody wants to see what they're doing. So those shows usually draw pretty well, like student showcases and stuff. So if I was in
it's
Washington, that might be where I'd go.
it's a lot of it is like because there's a lot of schools in the region. A
Yeah.
promoter will call a school, say in Oregon, or in British Columbia or Idaho or whatever. Say, I need 4 guys. You have anybody? 6 students will show up, and
Okay.
then you find spots for those guys, and then you
Right.
have your regulars that have been around and are no longer students connected with the school.
Okay.
But to qualify for your theatrical license, you have to use the students. They don't have to be your school per se, but they
Right.
have to be attached to a wrestling school in order to
Okay.
qualify.
Well, that's actually not a bad deal. So, and it gets the
Yeah.
kids experience wrestling in front of a crowd. I mean,
Well, a lot
yeah,
of the students too, they've been around for a long time. They might
sure.
have been 2 or 3 years into their career, but they still go to the school.
And train.
That
Yeah.
way they qualify as a wrestling student, and that way they
No.
can get bookings. Whereas if you graduate the students and they're no longer connected to the school, your talent pool just plummets because you
Right.
can't use those guys and
Right.
still qualify for it. So it's a little bit of a tricky
Yeah. Tricky thing to navigate. Yeah.
proposition, but most promotions in Washington run off theatrical now. There's one in Ocean Shores where I work where he runs primarily off just a standard license. He ran a theatrical license his last show
Okay.
and had one match where it was all wrestling school students and then the rest were his regulars, but he only
Okay.
ran 4 matches, so it was easy enough to accomplish it.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So what was do you remember what your first match was as a wrestler?
It was an 8-man tag at Hoosier Pro Wrestling. I was tagged with Gravedigger, Billy Ray Hickerson, and Donnie Idol. And we wrestled Jerry Wilson, Ox Harley, and Tommy Ray Sands, and someone whose name's going to escape me for the moment. And our
Okay.
special guest referee was um, a wrestler that had been at HPW, who had been hurt for a while and was coming back, and he was doing the guest referee spot, which tied into the finish and set up his return after that.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Scotty Lovins was the ref.
Oh, Scotty Lovins. Okay, I know Scotty. Awesome. So had you transitioned into a babyface from there?
I was the heel.
Okay.
I was definitely a heel. I was kind of sort of baby face for a little bit. They did an angle when we were moving back to Washington and sort of turned me. And so
Yeah.
for the first few times I went back, I was more of a baby face. But once that match hit, I had turned against Jerry Wilson. Everyone wanted to see me dead.
That's awesome. I just, because you were teaming with Donnie Idol, I can't imagine Donnie Idol being a heel in Columbus, but I guess
Oh yeah,
he
for
was
sure
at
he
that
was
point.
a heel. He was a
Okay.
heel for sure. When he started out, he was Donnie Dynasty, Dave Dynasty's brother,
Sure.
and they
Yeah, I
were a
remember
heel
that.
tag team.
Okay. Okay. I wasn't here for that, but I've heard about that. I remember Donnie Idol and Chris Caliber did a heel tag team for me for a little while, and Donnie absolutely hated it. He does not like working heel. So I'm
He did at
surprised that
one point.
what's that?
He did at one point. He was a very, very good heel.
Yeah,
He
I'm
did
sure he's
heel
good
for a
good
long
at
time.
it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
I used
just
to
at this
watch
point
him.
in his career.
Yeah, once he turned baby face, he didn't really like to confuse the fans, so he
Sure.
liked being baby.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny the way that they turned heel. We were we brought in Bob Evans and Tim what I can't think of his last name.
Tim
Do you remember
Hughes.
Tim Hughes? Yeah, we brought in Bob Evans and Tim Hughes, and we had built this whole thing where Donnie and Caliber really respected Tough Guy Inc. and they just wanted to test themselves against the best team in the world. Um, Bob Evans got to the show and didn't want to put together that kind of a match. He wanted to put together a match where they were straight up baby faces and High Caliber was straight up heels. So to accommodate Bob Evans, we turned them heel that night. It's kind of an interest, and the match was amazing. So I mean, it was an interesting thing. He didn't want to put together a uh, like a not even necessarily a young team. I guess they were two veterans who wanted to prove that they were just as good as these respected veterans. But and they were going to go over, and it was supposed to elevate them even higher as a respected tag team. So I had to kind of change my booking up a little bit because to accommodate Bob Evans was an interesting. But I'm like that as far. I mean, it really depends on what the person is asking for. But my booking can be fluid. I like people to be happy, So I think that when talent's happy, they wrestle for you better. So I always try to get to what they want and what I want at the same time. So everybody comes out happy. So
Bob Evans usually has a pretty good idea of what's going to work too. So
yeah. He just didn't think that the crowd would buy it, But at the same time, I don't think he realized how over Donnie and Caliber were. But I mean, it was fine, Obviously, I'm not gonna tell Bob Evans he's wrong. So that was, yeah, that was what,
accommodating his booking saved us in Kentucky one time. He brought in Tim Hughes like he normally does, but there was a
yeah.
miscommunication, and they didn't realize Tim Hughes was going to be there. So at
Okay.
the last minute, they put Tim in the match. I got into the match because I was there for a seminar, and someone didn't show up, so they asked if I had my gear, which of course I always bring it. So they asked me to referee it, and I ended up in Bob Evans' match because the regular referee there got injured, and
Okay.
you do the match. So we get out there, and since they had to change things a little bit, they took a heel manager and put him on the heel side and Tim with Bob on the babyface side. The
Okay.
local baby face got hard weight on the top of his head. And I
Oh,
look down and he's bleeding. The commissioner's around 20 feet away from us. So I'm telling him he's got collar. He's got collar.
yeah,
Bob took a few seconds to think. He had them throw the baby face into the heel corner.
yeah,
And since the manager was in the match, he still had his street clothes on. He just draped his shirt over the guy's head, pressed down, and was
right.
punching the guy. But he's actually stopping the blood, so the commissioner never knew the guy was actually bleeding, which in Kentucky is
Man.
a big problem.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, you cannot bleed in Kentucky. That's you would you can go right outside to Evansville and bleed all you want, but you can't bleed in Kentucky.
Once you cross that bridge, it's no
Yeah,
collar.
yeah. So, is it fair to say that you've kind of seen your greatest success in the wrestling business as a referee? Because
It depends on how you look at things. I mean, I'm a HPW Hall of Fame member. I never refereed one day there.
okay, okay,
But like the biggest crowd I was ever in front of was just last month at Midget Warriors, and I refereed for them. They drew 1,500 people at a casino in
wow,
northern Washington. So it
wow.
just depends on how you look at it, really.
Yeah, well, I feel like as a referee, you've been able to travel a lot, and I feel like you're one of the more respected referees on the independent scene. So that's just kind of how I look at it. I feel like you've been very successful as a referee. So
Kevin Sullivan helped with that. He put me over on a few different podcasts as a referee that he most enjoyed working with. So that
awesome.
shot my stock way up there when he did that.
Very cool. Very cool. So transitioning into podcasting. When did you decide that you wanted to start a podcast to kind of go along with your wrestling career? Like how did that all work out?
Similarly enough, it was not something I consciously decided. The guys at Turnbuckle Turmoil asked me to come on and talk about what was then a cup of coffee I had in the business. So I did that. And before I even appeared on the show, like I was already booked for it, but before we got to me, the founder of the show asked if I would come on as a co-host because they were looking for another person. I gave it some thought. I said, sure, we'll see how it goes, I guess. And I've been at it ever since.
Wow. And now what do you do two podcasts a week? Is that right? Or
A week, Sign Guys Wrestling Show on Fridays and Turnbuckle Turmoil, the primary show on Sunday afternoons.
that's awesome. And I love being on your show. It's so fun. Um, every time I have something important, a lot of times the first thing I do is just go, "Who wants me on their show?" and I put it on Facebook. And then you're always like, you can come on my show anytime, and I'm like, "Yeah, this is really for you, man." I know we'll hook up at some point, but yeah, I love being on your show, man. It's the questions are fun. Um, I'm always I'm always able to get whatever point across I need to. Like you give me that room, but then like I said, we also always have a lot of fun. So yeah, your show is great. I'm glad it's lasted so long, and if or maybe when I ever come back to the wrestling business, you'll probably be my first stop. So
You all just have to give me a shout and let me
yeah,
know.
for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
your last stop was Controversies Month, as I recall it. And
oh
we
yeah,
did
we did do that. That was fun. Yeah, you had some really informed guests on there. I felt like I was possibly the least informed person, but I did my best to keep up. But yeah, the Vince McMahon, the whole Vince McMahon thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
we looked around, found some people that knew a little bit about it, and
yeah,
brought them together and did fairly well with it. It's not a usual path we go down, but I figured we'd give it a shot and see what happened with a few of the controversies.
sure, sure. Yeah, I actually am a co-host on a podcast now called Wrestling Behind Ringside. Um, and Logan Paul definitely gave us some stuff to talk about on Saturday, uh, as far as controversial stuff. I don't know if you saw the
Yeah,
tweet that he put out earlier, but man, uh,
that and he's being sued by the Olympics. Yeah.
yeah. So he's just yeah, he's having a bad time right now. Um,
Imagine being a heel going into Cleveland and you have that
yeah,
happen days before.
yeah. Oh, people were already gonna be ready to kill him. He's going against LA Knight. And LA Knight has a pretty good history in that area in Ohio and in general. So I'm sure he's gonna have a lot of people there supporting him. But so I did want to mention one last thing before we head out, which is the Idaho Wrestle Club. That promotion is very cool. I caught up with them on YouTube, and as often happens, there was Sign Guy on my TV. It seems
Yes,
like
indeed.
a lot of times I come across something on YouTube and it's a cool independent promotion, and all of a sudden it's like there's Sign Guy Refn. I think that's happened at least 2 or 3 times. So, what's the experience like out there? They seem like they have a pretty creative crew out there, and I like watching their stuff. So,
Yeah, it's a great promotion. They celebrate their 9-year anniversary at the end of this month, which I'll be there for that. Um, they are local around Boise and the surrounding communities, and they will go to different charitable organizations and they tie every show in with either a charity or a fundraiser or something to that effect. So they're raising funds for whatever cause at a given show. They were just at the uh, county fair in Caldwell, Idaho last week. They ran 4 days and they would run a couple of matches every hour. So they were out there for a very, very long time last week, doing well. A lot of people came over and watched the matches off and on, so it was a good time. But they're a great crew. They were trained from scratch. The promoter there, Garabai, had been wrestling for several years, and there weren't any local wrestlers in Idaho except for him. So he would have to drive 9, 10 hours just to get to the closest independent
wow,
one way.
wow,
And he started looking around for people that were interested in wrestling, and he got enough people. He was able to go to a park and train them on the grass in the park until he got a ring. And then once he got a ring, they were able to train properly. And then they started running shows, and they've been at it pretty close to 9 years now.
that's awesome. That's that's very cool. Oh, one thing that I did want to ask you about that it should have honestly been more of a middle of the interview thing, but we got talking about stuff and I kind of forgot about it. But you suffered a pretty bad injury at one point getting tossed out of the ring, right?
Tossed out of the ring was a pretty significant injury. Yeah,
Yeah. Would do you want to talk about that just for a minute?
I can do that. Sure.
Sure. Okay.
Are you familiar with exactly what went down?
I've heard the story a couple times, but just to refresh my memory and for our listeners.
So at HPW, their 15th anniversary, there was a battle royal, and the HPW anniversary show always coincided with the Firemen's Cheer Fund. So they would use local firemen on the show. We did a 6-man tag the year before where I wrestled against them in a 6-man, and they were going to put 3 firemen in the battle royal. And initially they were like, "Can we get tossed out?" And I said, "Hard no, because you're firemen and you're not trained." So I
Right.
said, "They can throw me out last. I'm the smallest guy. I stand the best chance of not getting hurt, and we'll come up with a way to do it safe." Uh, Started asking guys for opinions on what we could do. I got a really good plan from a then rookie named Gregor Petrov, and he suggested we just do fireman related moves, stuff that was safe. So I said, all right, that makes sense. So we explained they were going to spread me out like a fireman's blanket, lift me up, let me drop safely to my feet. We went over it probably 15 to 20 times the day of the show. Went fine 19 of the times. The first time I was able to correct them right away, and they didn't miss after that. They get in the match. One guy got superstar-itis, and he's like, I had a match last year. I must know everything there is to know. And so he went against everything we had shown him that day. First thing he did was grab me by my arm and separate my shoulder. And then they lifted me up under their shoulders like I was the coach after the big game. And I was telling them to put me down, but they thought I was just selling. They got tired enough that since my weight wasn't distributed equally, I lowered about 1.5 inches. That 1.5 inches caused me to not clear the rope, so my foot caught in the rope. I wasn't going out, so they thought I just wanted them to launch, and so they launched me forward. My foot broke free, and then I just dropped like a rock to the cement floor. Took the most perfect face bump in the history of the professional wrestling industry, but because I was so high up in the air and I hit concrete, there was a little bit of damage. That floor is still dented to this day. Marcus Fine sent me a picture of it fairly recently.
Oh man, that's crazy. So so you were you not only had a separated shoulder, but you were busted open pretty good, right? Is that fair?
I wasn't really busted open that bad. It was mostly internal, but I had a concussion, a contusion of the brain, a subdermal hematoma, a shattered orbital socket, a ruptured blood vessel, and a separated shoulder.
Wow.
Yeah, they wouldn't tell me how many skull fractures I had, but a lot.
Jeez.
And
So
yeah, I was knocked out for probably 4 minutes. Then I came to, I don't remember, about 45 minutes of that night to this day, but apparently I came to and was telling people in Kearney I was fine, keep going to the next segment. Because I had about 8 segments on that show. I was a lot I had to do on that show, and I kept trying to keep going, but people knew better and stopped me. And I ended up, they took me to Columbus Regional first, and they didn't know how I was alive, and they didn't have a neurologist, so they had me lifeline to Indianapolis, where I woke up and a doctor and a bunch of nurses were on top of me, and I told them they had to get off of me because I was booked in Kentucky the next day. Then I came up with a plan to get out of there and walk to Kentucky for my booking, and then promptly passed out, and I did not make it to Kentucky the next day.
Yeah, I would assume not. So what was the recovery? What's that?
The next week I was in Kentucky. I just could not actually get into the ring.
Right. So
I
what was the
paperwork.
You did what now? Sorry.
I did sign the paperwork saying I was there. So I made my shot the next week.
Nice. So what was the recovery process like from that injury?
Strangely enough, with all of that, all I had to do was wait.
Really?
Like there was no intervention needed at all. Everything healed up naturally on its own. They gave me pain pills. I don't like pain pills, so I didn't take them all that long. But yeah, I was hooked up to morphine for a day or two in the hospital. Then they gave me pain medicine as needed, and that was it. My shoulder, no doctor would listen to me. I kept telling them in the hospital my ribs hurt, and they kept saying, your ribs are fine. What else hurts? I said, just my ribs. I guess I'm all right. And it turned out a couple of months later, when I went to see my acupuncture, he walked in the room. He said, how long has your shoulder been separated?
Wow.
I said, my shoulder is separated. He said, I can see it from here. So I asked if that would cause pain to go down into my ribs. He said, well, of course.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I said, well, then it's been separated since I fought these rogue firemen. And a couple acupuncture sessions, and my shoulder was back to normal.
Oh, good deal. Good deal. And obviously, I mean, you never thought about packing it in. Like you just kept going after the injury.
I was trying to get to Kentucky for my next shot.
Yeah, that
I
freaking
woke
night.
up and I told the doctor I got a booking in Kentucky. He says that's not important. You have a concussion, a contusion, and a subdermal hematoma. I said that's not important. I'm booked with Felony Fox.
There you go.
And yeah,
There you go. I remember
was
Felony Fox.
Oh,
I
I loved
remember her.
working for her in Fujo down
Yeah.
in Georgetown.
Yeah, I remember her. So what do you think it is about either the wrestling business in general or you as a person specifically that keeps you involved and keeps you creative and keeps you wanting to do this and wanting to show up to these events and talk about it on the podcast, and just what do you think it is that keeps you so invested in it?
We're just crazy.
Yeah, fair.
That's
That
all I
works.
can figure, Keith.
Yeah, absolutely, man. All right, well, Sign Guy, thank you so much. This has been a super fun conversation. As always, before we sign off, if there's anything you want to plug, anywhere you will be, now is your opportunity.
Well, I will be at Inclusion Pro Wrestling in Kelso, Washington on Saturday. The following week on the 10th, I will be in Vaughan, Washington at the Key Peninsula Civic Center for Northwest Pro Wrestling. And on the 30th, I'll be back in Idaho for the Wrestle Club 9th anniversary show. On the second Saturday in September, I'll be back at Northwest Pro. And April 12th, I believe, I will be back in your neck of the woods for Pawcade. I'll be
cool.
at the, I believe it'll be the 5th annual Pawcade next year.
Awesome.
And you can find us on Turnbuckle Turmoil. You can look that up on blogtalkradio.com, or you can go to Apple and find it on there. Tomorrow on the show, we have the promoters from Inclusion Pro Wrestling talking about the event for Saturday. And then Sunday, we have Tornado Tony Kazina on the show.
Nice. Former NWA Junior Heavyweight Champion, right?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Awesome, man. All right. Well, and as far as I go, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Hopefully I did this well enough that Tyler's not going to have too much to do in post. And I want to thank Tyler and Emmy Studios. Hopefully everything's okay with him. Because like I said, this isn't like him to not be here, but hope everybody has a great week, and we will talk to you next time. Welcome to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Keith. And as you can see, still not in the studio. Tyler's still not feeling well, but we are moving along, man. We're getting these interviews done. We're knocking them out. We're talking to some awesome people. And tonight we have Bloodsaw here with us. He is a professional wrestler. He is also an actor, a musician, very talented man. Bloodsaw, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you guys having me on here today. it's a lot of fun getting to talk to you guys, and I appreciate what you guys do, putting the effort to give guys like me a space to come be a little bit weird with you. That's
Right
cool.
on. Yeah, thanks. So let's start from the beginning. That's where we like to start. So when did you know that you wanted to be involved in the entertainment business, whether that was the acting, the music, or the wrestling?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting way to phrase it. I like that. A lot of people are like, when did you know you wanted to be a wrestler? I'm like, I had no idea. So like entertainment for me, man, it's always just been something I really enjoyed. From a young age, love to sing. I love to like be out there in front of people doing theater, stuff like that. It's always entertainment, and like as I've grown into wrestling, especially, they always say wrestling is you turned up to 11. And I think recently I've come to realize that that's entirely true. Bloodsaw with the top hat and being who I am, when I come out the curtain, welcome to the show. And it's always been that way for me, like for as long as I can remember. I think, the first time I really was like, I'm going to go do something. It was like 5th grade, there was chorus, and I was like, oh, I get to go sing in front of people. I was like, yeah, man, let's do it. So I just took off performing, brother. I never looked back. I love it. I love everything about it. The energy. I don't care what anyone tells you. The energy that you feel when people are there and you're and like they're with you. Can't top that. I don't care what you do. Can't top that. So
yeah, it's the best feeling in the world, man, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
So, was music what got your foot in the door then? Was it's like singing in the choir, that was where it started, or the chorus?
Actually, so it was kind of a little bit before that where like I started to do some performance stuff. Like I was just down to do whatever, but then like, so when we got to, hey, you could sing, you could pick up an instrument. So like I started playing saxophone at the same time. A lot of kids, they were like, dude, you're a young kid, and they're like, oh, well, you could sing or you could play an instrument, or, and I was like, no, I want to do both. And they were like, well, that's not really an option. And I was like, make it an option. And so I did, man. I used to, sometimes it is, they'll still give you some cojones on it in school, but if you push what you want, man, you could have it. Cause so yeah, I play alto and tenor saxophone. Did that for a long time. I still play. I still own a sax now. And then, I sing every week. I still sing constantly. So.
Awesome. Yeah, saxophone's a great instrument, man. I love the sound of saxophone. Like nothing beats a good sax solo,
It's super cool because like, I don't know why this is such a weird thing. I can't really play the guitar or bass because in my head, for whatever reason, it doesn't work to be like, oh, you got to get closer to make it a high pitch. Like, you know what I mean? And on the sax, it's like, no, you just work your way down and then you're good to go. So like, but it's also cool because usually if there's a sax solo in a song, the singer's not singing. So most of my bands, when I would gig out, I would do both, and it was never a problem because no one sings over a sax solo. So it was cool.
Nice. So, when did you? So after the music, did the acting come? Was that the next step?
So yeah, acting and theater. How I got into theater and performing on a bigger stage like that is kind of a fun story ish. It's just the way life goes, right? So I was a perennial athlete. I played football, baseball, basketball. Man, I was into it. But when I was younger, I would like run cross country at school, leave that, and go to football practice, and like that's what I would do. Like I just wanted to stay in shape and do my thing. Freshman year of high school, I'm out there and I'm playing football, and I was on varsity freshman year, so like things were cool. Got my first letter, cool. Winter hits and I'm playing basketball, and I go for a layup in practice and I break my ankle. Completely destroyed my ankle in practice. And I'm like, I'm only here to stay in shape because like baseball and football are much more my sports. But I'm 5'10", I'm 240. Like I'm not a dunker, you know what I mean? Like I'm just here to run and stay in shape, brother. So I break my ankle, and my football coach is like, "Well, it's going to mess up your lifting." how are you going to be ready for football season? And I was like, damn, you're right. So quit basketball and ended up, I was like, well, I can't do nothing because that's not who I am as a person. So I was already singing. I played saxophone. I was musically inclined, but I'd never done a musical before. And somebody was like, well, that's kind of like the same season, you know? So I went out. I had no idea what I was doing, man. I auditioned. I'm pretty sure I sang the Star Spangled Banner for my first audition ever. Because I walk on stage and the teacher's like, what are you singing? And I was like, what am I supposed to sing now?
Yeah, it's what that song.
I was like, I don't have sheet music. I don't know what I'm doing. And
Right.
so I sang that. I ended up, it was a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. I don't know if you know the show or not.
Yeah.
I got cast as Miles Gloriosus. My first ever role. I walked in, I got a lead character. I never looked back, man. I have no regrets about that. And, you know, I always tell people, I'm like, listen, just say yes to life because you never know where you're going to get to. If you're saying no, you'll get nowhere. So they were like, oh, try out for the musical. Okay. And then my junior year of high school, they were like, hey, come try out for this musical, not at the school. So I went and I did my first like community theater show. Somebody there saw me. They were like, hey, you should come audition for this paid show. And I was like, you get paid for this? You know? And yeah, man, it just took off from there. That was my whole progression. I think I did 6 shows and then I started getting paid. And I was just
That's
out there doing it.
Awesome, man.
Super
Yeah,
fun, bro.
so
Super fun.
And you know what's funny? The Star Spangled Banner is a song that everyone knows, but it's one of the hardest songs to sing. Like you picked a hard song for your audition, man. Like,
Dude, well, I'm a high tenor. So like, you know, think, I don't know, anyone who doesn't know singing, think somewhere between like Ozzy and Josh Groban level of singing, like whatever you're into. Meatloaf, sure. I grew up singing Meatloaf and Cooper, Guns N' Roses, like that kind of stuff. So hitting the high notes for me, like, yeah, man, let's rip it. Let's get into it.
When I was younger, I was in metal bands, and it's really good workout for your vocals. But now I'm 50, and they're shredded. You know, I mean, It's
hard, man. Like doing the metal stuff. It was always described to me as like, imagine you just took a mouthful of gravel and swallowed it, and then try and sing through it. And I was like, damn, this sucks. But, you know, that's what it is. So.
Yeah, and so much of it is in your throat, which isn't a normal way to sing. It puts a lot of strain on your vocal cords. I tried so hard to sing from my diaphragm, but with some of that music, I couldn't anyway. I don't know if other people can, but
dude, you can't growl from your diaphragm. You know what I mean? It's
exactly,
dude, I'll tighten up the diaphragm. I'll hit, you know, if I'm singing Patience or something, like, yeah, dude, that's all from the diaphragm, but I'm not ripping through something crazy from my diaphragm. Which doesn't happen.
Yeah, for sure, man. So, I noticed when I was doing a little research on you that you've done Rocky Horror.
Yeah, brother.
That is, what is that experience like? Just walk me through it, man. That's amazing. Like,
well, you know what, man? Let's keep the story rolling. So my first ever paid show was Rocky Horror. So like I had seen the movie because everyone's seen the movie, right? If you're
of course,
any kind of a degenerate at all, you've seen it. So of course I've seen it a bunch of times. So that was the show where they were like, "Hey, you were good in this. You should come audition for this show." And I was like, "Okay, cool." I think I was 18 years old, literally, and I was like, "Yeah, man, I'll show up." So I showed up to this audition, and I meet the director. I've never even met him before. And he shakes me and he goes, "Hey, Rocky, nice to meet you." And I was like, "My name is Quince." Bloodsaw, you know, it's not who I am, right? And so he's like, "Oh, well, you're going to be Rocky here." And I walk in. I was trying to audition for Raff, you know, Riff Raff, because I was like, that's the song I like. I even sang, what's it called? The Morpheus song?
Yeah.
The darkness must flow. That one. So I sang that, and he was like, "That's cool, Rocky." And I was like, "Damn, all right, whatever." So, but like part of the audition process, now if you've ever seen the movie, you know the pool scene? You know the pool scene at the end?
Yeah.
So part of the audition, and when you do it live on stage, the Transylvanians there, they come out and they're dressed in blue, and they surround the main characters, and they are the water, and you're swimming through these waters, but it's people.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
it's not lacking in sensuality.
Right.
So part of the audition was to actually do that. And so
Right.
you're in a room full of 40 people you've never met before, and they're like, all right, everybody lay together next to each other, alternate head and toes. Okay, and now get from one side of the room to the other and touch as many people as you can on the way.
Wow.
And I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, this is crazy. Because I didn't know that was a part of the show. I was like, this is just a really weird kink, I guess. But whatever. Yeah. I'm 18. Let's go for it.
Your extra wants to see it.
Yeah, man. So like, I did it, and everything worked out well. But that show, I've toured it and performed it, I think, like 52 times is the number. And it's just been so. Interestingly enough, if you've seen the movie, I also play the Eddie sax solo. So like cool. On stage as Rocky, I'm in the gold underwear and I'm doing the whole thing. But then I'll play the sax solo live. So that was one of my first times being paid to play saxophone as well, because they didn't have to hire the extra sax player for the pit for that one song. It was just, pay that guy a little more. He'll hop up on stage and do it. So that was kind of cool.
That's awesome, man.
I ended up later in my career too. So with wrestling, this was the most recent time, because I won't say last because you never know, but the most recent time I had done Rocky, it was billed in Connecticut as Buzz Bloodsaw is Rocky Horror. And so it was a bunch of these like newspaper things where it was like, Rocky, me with the blonde hair looking through the mask, and it was all these things. And we ended up booking it as a flash mob at a wrestling event. So a couple of context clues here that are really weird, and if you're into wrestling, it's cool.
Oh yeah.
So this was Ox Baker's last ever wrestling show.
Oh,
so
wow.
Ox Baker, who ended up dying fairly, I think it was like 6 months after this. He was at this show. So he gets in the ring, and he's in the ring, and he's looking at us, and it was me and my group at the time. So we're all face painted weirdos. And he's looking at us, and he's like, what is wrong with these guys? And then the music hits, and out from the back come all the Transylvanians and Riff Raff and Magenta and Columbia, and everybody gets in the ring. And Ox Baker is standing in the middle of the ring going, the hell is it? So they throw a feather boa on him, and they do the time warp. So in a wrestling ring, you've got a couple of face-painted guys, Ox Baker with a pink feather boa, a bunch of leather-clad men and women doing the time warp. And it was one of the most significant days for me of my wrestling career, because we get out of the ring, and Ox Baker comes up to me in the locker room. And, if you've ever worked with these legends or these guys, that they have these respectable, I was there when this happened. And, and Ox looks at me and he goes, that was the best wrestling thing I have ever seen. And I was like, what do you mean, man? And he was like, wrestling is a circus. And he's like, and I tell this story all the time. He's like, wrestling is a circus. You don't go there to see all acrobats. You don't go there to see all lion tamers. You go there because sometimes you got to have something weird happening here, and then this happening here, and this happening here. And he was like, there's never been something like this before. That's wrestling. And that's stuck with me forever.
That's awesome. Yeah,
man. Huge bit of advice where like it just kind of taught me that in wrestling, when you think you can define something as like this is what it has to be, man. Try something else and watch what happens.
One of the best things about wrestling is that there's something for everybody in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's if it's done right, there's something for everybody. And it's really, really cool. What got me interested in wrestling when I was a kid was I really liked comic books. I kind of got into both at the same time. I was around 4 years old when I got into both but it was like comic books first. And I was like, there's superheroes on TV. You know what I mean? Like, it's, so it was really cool. Like the comic book, I'm not sure who it was, but there was actually a panel at San Diego Comic-Con this year explaining the connection between wrestling and comics. And
That's cool.
I'm not sure who hosted it, but I can't remember. Oh, maybe Tony Schiavone, actually.
Okay, that
I think
makes
it might
sense.
have been Tony Schiavone or the guy who wrote Tony Schiavone's book. Yeah, because Tony Schiavone has a comic book called Butts and Seats, and it's pretty good. Honestly, it's like his whole history in the business in comic book form. It's pretty cool.
That's cool, man.
Yeah. So, anyways,
entertainment and like, well, I was gonna say, like, for me, man, like that was kind of like what hooked me. I didn't watch wrestling a lot growing up. I wasn't allowed to, but when I was a kid around like 4 years old, I saw it was Undertaker and Warrior in the body bag match. Yeah. And like Ultimate Warrior, man, he was my guy. Like even still, I do a lot of weird things because he did it, and I think it's cool. But like, you know, that he was at the time, he was such a superhero that I was like, wow. Like that same thought process of superheroes, that was always my thought. So it's kind of funny that you had the same thought process behind it.
I mean, I think we're not alone in that, man. I think like it's a connection that a lot of wrestling fans make, especially if they get into it younger. You know, they make the connection between the superheroes and heroes and villains on TV, you know, real life superheroes. So big characters, you know. So from well, let's talk a little bit about the music because we haven't talked too much about it.
Okay.
What did you ever record anything, or you just strictly performed live with bands, or how?
I just performed live. We did a couple of things where like, I would like in high school it was a big thing for us. Like we'd go around, we'd pick up different shows, we would just play out wherever we could and do stuff. After that, I did some stuff like singing out with my uncle has a band that I would sing for his band every now and then, and I'll still fill in with some different weird stuff if I can. I don't get to gig as much as I would like to anymore, just because life happens, man. And like, you know, when you have a regular, like I say a regular job, but like, you know, I do professional wrestling. I do run restaurants. I do that kind of stuff too. So like, I'm always around the scene, which is why I sing every week. You know, I'm out there doing different stuff, entertaining in some way. But having a consistent band is tough. I will say this though, right now there's a project I'm working on where royalty music in the modern age of professional wrestling, right? When you have your entrance song and do you have the rights to that? And then they shut you down. Right. Well, if you write and record your own songs, you have all the royalties.
Yeah.
So I can't necessarily say anything yet, but there is potentially a few Bloodsaw things coming of some things that I will then have to own the rights and royalty to. So we're working on a couple of projects. We'll see what happens, but that's the plan, man.
Nice. So from the music, from the acting, how do you become a wrestler from that? Like, where does that transition happen?
It's kind of an accident, to be completely honest with you, because I didn't grow up watching wrestling. Like I said, I've told the story a couple of times. When I was a young kid, I saw Jimmy Snuka jump off the cage on a video, and I was like literally 4 years old. Pulled out my wrestling buddy, pulled out my couch cushions, climbed on top of the fridge, and then jumped off my fridge onto like just couch cushions. My parents were like, "Not a good plan." Because I was at the time just watching a bunch of old Coliseum home videos. That's what I would do. So fast forward like what was it, 2011. So however long ago that was. I was running gyms. So I was a general manager for LA Fitness gyms, and I was doing personal training and all that kinds of stuff. And I was training a football team local in Connecticut, and I was their trainer, and I was like, cool, maybe I'll go back to playing football. I was still doing theater, but I missed a role. So like, for anyone who doesn't know how theater works, you only get paid when the show ends most of the time. So like, if you miss a role and like you don't get cast as the part you're supposed to get cast for, there's no money until you find your next casting. So I was like, well, this is not ideal because now I'm not making money. I need that extra money. What should I do? And the guy called me. He's like, hey man, there's a wrestling tryout on South Windsor. And it wasn't even a tryout, it was a seminar.
Okay.
And I was like, what does that even mean? Like, I don't literally.
Yeah.
And he thought I was kidding. I was like, what does that even mean? So he's like, listen, Robbie E is coming to South Windsor. He's going to be doing a thing. Sign up. He's like, you get in the ring for 3 hours with Robbie E. He'll teach you a couple of things about it. If you like it, maybe that could be your thing. He's like, it's kind of like acting and football put together because you hit people, you entertain, all these things. I was like, that does sound kind of fun. I do like that. So I went, I signed up for the seminar, and I showed up, and I was the only guy to show up. So it was me, Robbie E, and one of his students. We were in the ring for 3 hours. And so by the end of 3 hours, we ran a 5-minute match. And I'd gone from like, I've never even locked up with a guy to a 5-minute match. It wasn't good. Don't give me credit. Don't be like, oh, these are natural. No, we got through something. And what's funny is that show ended up being canceled. Didn't even happen. It was literally just, it was a snowstorm. And so like all these crazy things. Yeah. But yes, I showed up, I did that. I quit my job Monday. Seminar was on Saturday, and I quit my job on Monday, and I went to wrestling school. And that was it, man. I enjoyed what it was, the athleticism of it. It was fun. And like, there was no crowd. It was just like a demo match for Robbie E, man. But like, and I didn't know who Robbie E even was. I had literally no idea. What's that?
I said Robbie E's a very talented guy. Like I've followed him from broadcasts on the Indies. So I mean, I've watched his whole career. Like I'm kind of a fan of Robbie E, to be honest. Like it's fun to watch.
No, he's a good dude. Super nice dude. I'm like, and that's the thing is like he had no reason to do anything like that for me because I didn't know what the business was, man. He could have been like, oh, lock up. Okay, now bump for 2 hours and then been like, go home. But he didn't do that. You know, he was like, let's get something out of it. Right. So, I quit my job Monday. I had my first day of wrestling school was December 6th, 2011. So that was like the day where I went in there, I started. I had my first match the third week of January 2012. So like, we were live and in front of a crowd. I think it was the second or third week of January. I had a double shot day. My first day ever, I had a double shot. We did at the wrestling school, we had like a little kid's birthday party in the afternoon. Sure. And then we took off and we went down to New York for a battle royal. So I did 2 matches my first day. But and that was it, man. And I didn't have a regular job again for like 5 years. Wow. I rode the wave, man. It was super awesome.
Yeah, very cool, man. So
it's kind of a weird transition.
Just kind of. So, you say you still sing every week at the restaurants. Are you still taking acting gigs, or is that kind of?
So I did an acting gig. My last one was 6 years ago.
Okay.
I think 6 years ago. I did Rock of Ages. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so I was Stacey Jax as the Tom Cruise character. Sure. So like that was my last gig I had done. I don't necessarily say no to them, but I mean with wrestling and everything else that I'm doing, theater takes a lot of time to do it right. Most things, if you're going to do it right, take a little bit of time. So with wrestling, like committing myself to being like, well, I'm going to be at rehearsals 4 nights a week, and then I'm going to perform Friday, Saturday, Sunday for these many weekends in a row. You know, it kind of goes back to like this mindset I had when I broke my ankle wrestling, playing basketball, where I was like, if it's not the thing I'm doing, it can't supersede the thing I want to be doing, because you know, you might as well break an ankle if you're going to take a whole month off of wrestling.
Right.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, what are we talking about here? So, you know, in wrestling, I think versus theater, like theater is, I think, a little more gentle to you as you age, whereas wrestling, like, I'm 35, right? So right now I'm having the most fun. Honestly, I'm having a ton of fun with it. But it's like, you know, when I'm 45, it'll be a different conversation. Whereas, hey, you're 45. Do you want to go sing on stage and do a dance number? Well, that's you know what I mean. So I kind of hedge those things against each other a little bit, and maybe it's a bad plan. Maybe it's not what everyone else would do, but for right now, it's like, you know, I've got the AIWF International title, and I'm trying to lock down my dates for a European tour. Like, I'm trying to lean into this wave and have some fun with this while I can, because, you know what I mean? Eventually someone's going to be like, hey man, your bump card's up. And I'm going to be like, oh, in the morning. So, yeah. So it's, yeah, I mean, I'm not against it, but.
Right on. So, currently you're focusing on wrestling, obviously.
Yeah.
And I know that you're a pretty big part of the AIWF, which is a large governing body of professional wrestling. I mean, it's
huge.
Yeah, territories all over the world.
Yeah.
So what do you currently have going on in wrestling? I mean,
all right. Well, this will take a few.
Okay.
Let me take a deep breath. No, so right now I'm the AIWF International Champion. Like you said, AIWF is huge. It's I want to say it's 150 different companies in 50 countries. So not just the U.S., but like all over the place. Matt Classic, I always got to shout him out. He's the president of the AIWF. Awesome guy. He works nonstop. Like, we're doing this right now. I don't know if anyone's going to know what time it is, but it's like 11:30 at night.
Yeah.
He's probably also awake doing something. And so, like, he deserves that respect of, like, that dude is a hustler. But, you know, winning this title has kind of, it's given me it's an opportunity to have a ton of fun, man. All these different companies, I reach out to them constantly because I want to travel. Now's the time. Let's do this. So I think since February, I'm at like 46 title defenses where like I'm just going, and like we're just going. So most weekends I try to wrestle 2 to 3 times if I can. I'll do a double shot on the same show if people want to really get out there and do it. Like more than half of my title defenses have been multi-man matches, which is kind of fun too, because you know those, it's a whole other sort of challenge. But so I've probably wrestled over 100. I've wrestled over 100 people for my title. I mean, I had one night where like it was a 30-person match for the title. So like, you know, it was a rumble. It was a rumble to pinfall. It was crazy.
Wow.
But you know, I like doing this. Like, this is what we're here for. So in terms of that, so I've got that going on. Like next weekend I'll be in East Haven. That's for PAPW. That's kind of my home promotion. So PAPW in Connecticut is Paradise Valley Pro Wrestling. It's run by Paul Roma and Mario Mancini.
Nice.
Yeah, so I work out at their school. So they have a school. I go down there most Wednesday nights. I'm down there training. I get like 4 or 5 hours in the ring to sweat, you know, doing ring work and training and staying on top of the game. Can't stress that enough for anybody listening who like is a wrestler or wants to be a wrestler. Like, you can't let off on that. Stay on that. Stay on the basics always. But yes, I work out with those guys. So they have a show. So I'll be down there doing that. What I like about that too, PAPW meant the students they have coming up and out, the people who like develop from there. I'll name drop some people if you guys want to Google them, man. But like Alan Compass, Sylvan, Jekyll, new guy coming out, Corey Duke, look Jermaine Marbury. Look up these guys on the internet. Just look them up. I won't tell you much about them. Just look them up, learn about them, because these are guys that are coming out. They're working super hard, and they deserve the shot. But so yeah, so I got a show with them. The weekend after that, I'll be in Sept-Îles, Quebec. It's 14 hours away from here, which I know because I'm going to drive there, because like flying up, the other option was to fly to Montreal, and it's like 9 hours from there. So that'll be cool. It's a super show. The guy I'm wrestling is from Spain, so I'm from the U.S. and he's from Spain, and we're wrestling in Canada. So
That's awesome.
It's
International
it's
affair.
a real, literal international title match. So that's cool. I wrestled in Canada like 2-3 weeks ago. I had a double shot in Massachusetts a couple weeks ago. I'm out there and I want to do it. Like even this podcast, man. I'm having fun getting to meet more people, talk to more people, and just do what we're doing. Wrestling is definitely like this thing where you get out what you put into it. Everything is like that. But with wrestling, man, it's like I'm trying to take this opportunity, this title, and I'm trying to get guys like those guys I just named. I want to make sure that they get an opportunity to go out there and succeed as well. It's so important in wrestling, man. Bring your boys with you. Do your thing. Love what you're living. You were in bands, right?
Yeah.
Dude,
Absolutely.
how much fun do you have on the road with your boys? That's what it is. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So
yeah,
man. So go ahead.
Thanks, man. No, I was just gonna say, like, along with what you're saying, I am not running a company right now. My partner actually sold our company last year. So, but I talked to Matt about bringing a couple of the young kids who I really believe in this area to the big anniversary show in March. And he was like, of course you can. So I've got a couple kids. Right now, it's looking like Brian Huff and Tice Young are coming. We might try to line up a couple of people to come too. But I really just want them to have the opportunity to be on this giant 2-day show, because those anniversary shows are huge, man. And there's so
much fun.
many promoters from all over the world there. And I just want, I at least want the two of them to get a chance to get out there and show what they can do. And I'm gonna rent the van. I'm gonna rent the cabin. I'm gonna pay them.
Yeah, man.
I just really believe in those kids. So
what I think is the most fun about those kinds of shows too, and this is something that could potentially be controversial. I don't know.
Hey.
A lot of people think that wherever they come from is the best wrestling.
Right.
I've heard that. Like,
right.
I'm in New England, right?
Yeah.
And everybody in New England's like, well, New England's got the best wrestling.
But have they been to the Midwest?
Exactly. Dude, when I went and trained in Hawaii, cool. I'm in Hawaii, and I walk into the school. It's the same school that trained Jeff Cobb. And I walk in here. I'm here for the week. I want to work out. And in the future, if I can get back here for a show, it'd be cool. There's no shows while I'm here. That's okay. I want to work out. And so these guys who are Samoan, they look at me and they go, cool. You want to train today? And I said, yeah. They go, well, before anyone can join our class, you have to be able to do 2,500 squats.
Right.
And then it's 50 roundhouse kicks per leg to the heavy bag before you can come in and train with us. And I was like, right now? Like, that's how we're starting? And sure enough, man, the whole class did it.
Yeah.
There was no joke, man. It was AZW. I don't know if they're still running. But the guy who trained me over there, it was crazy. But do that around the country. Tell me how many places can do that. And so I tell these guys, I'm like, when you go there, man, open your mind. I was there, and I had a match with Alan Compass. Awesome match. He and I wrestled each other for 2023, I think, like 10, 15 times. And like, we had a hardcore blow-off match. Like, it was a big thing. We did a lot of matches. I went down there. We had a great time, great match. It was my first time in North Carolina in front of that crowd. Super awesome match. And then I go to the back, and I sat down, and I was sitting with Greg Anthony, who's Golden Boy Greg Anthony. He's the AWF heavyweight champion. And, he's been wrestling.
He's
I want to say it's 20. He's wrestled 20 plus years. And he was like, you should do this, this, and this. And I was like, all right. I mean, and it's stuff where in New England it would never work. But, Greg's from down in Memphis. So that Memphis mindset, I mean, come on, you're going to tell me that Jerry the King Lawler doesn't know what he's doing? So it's like all these guys, when you get to go to these shows, ask somebody. And the hardest thing, I think, for a lot of guys, especially young guys, is accept the fact that they're probably going to tell you to change something.
Yeah.
And don't get mad. Don't get mad.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? So it's the showcases are great for that.
For sure. I was going to say that's one of the best things about the Midwest. Like in Chicago, the Illinois area, you've got like the super indie style. And then in Ohio, they're a lot more like tradition based. But then we've also got Kentucky. A lot of those Kentucky guys worked in Tennessee, and there's a really like old school Southern brawler mindset coming out of Kentucky, and then that all kind of converges, and that's what we get here. I mean, I'm originally from New York.
Yep.
I honestly have always loved the wrestling in the Midwest. Like, I think it's the coolest like hybrid style, and that still carries on today, which is really, really cool to me. Like I said, like we said, there's, wrestling works best when there's something in it for everybody, and that's, I think you get that out here a lot. So.
And that's the thing is, like, a lot of these guys, when you go to a wrestling show, they're afraid to find their spot on that show.
Yeah.
So I am 5'10". I weigh 252 pounds,
right.
But I can do a standing moonsault and a standing shooting star. I've only ever done those things in the ring 2 or 3 times because my place on the show doesn't always call for it. But I think a lot of guys, they get so hung up in, I am this, that they're afraid to do something else. And I think that's, it's like, it's such a good opportunity to be like, hey, who am I? Like, what can I do to make the overall show better?
Right. And I think a problem that a lot of the young kids have too, and I don't want to turn this into like a school.
Oh, I'm not trying to complain about it. No, I'm just trying to say it from a positive way.
I'm saying, like, I'm not trying to turn this into like, let's teach wrestling podcast.
Okay. My bad.
No, you're good. But I think a problem that a lot of the young kids have is they want to get out there and show everything they can do every single night because they want to have a banger every night. Yeah, so they want to go out there and do every move in their bag. And then, you get, okay, so we have a guy out here, Mitchell Taylor. He travels all over the place. He's actually been on some of the AIWF shows, the anniversary ones, but he's been in England. He wrestles regularly in Colorado. Like he's been doing it for over 20 years, but he's a bigger guy. So he was working with this Lucha kid on one of my shows, and I went up to him and I said, "Hey man, you're going over with your finishing move on this kid. Give him some stuff because he's got some neat stuff, but you're going over with your finish." And he brings like a little purple bag sometimes with him because he's royalty. And so his finishing move was pulling a chain out of that bag and punching the kid in the face with it. And it's perfect, so perfect. Like, and I think there's lessons in that for the younger kids. Like, if someone tells you to go over with your finish, you don't have to do a freaking 450 moonsault. Like you can, And the kid looked good too. Like it was a really good match. So
yeah, no, I mean that's wrestling, man. It's like check the ego at the door. We're there to entertain. It's the most excellent entertainment there is, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the fun of it, right? It's like I come out, I sing my theme song while I'm walking out to the ring. I have some fun. I juke, I jive a little bit. It's like, I don't know, man. Like,
it's great.
You can't take this. Yeah, we're here to wrestle, and it's time to fight, and it's time to have, I'm gonna hit you hard, and it's gonna hurt, but we're gonna also be entertained, man. That's what we're here for. I want to have fun too, damn it. I'm gonna have fun beating you up,
Yeah.
People don't think about it that way.
So it sounds like probably, because this is a question that we'd like to ask, but with you, it almost feels like a moot point. But this is kind of the last question we like to ask. It sounds like your biggest setback was your ankle. Is that fair or?
My biggest setback in like athletics or life or what? I don't know.
Or just well, yeah, either or, like something that could have stopped you from pursuing the entertainment business or pursuing
Oh,
the creative side of your life. Yeah.
I mean, there's a ton of things that like,
Yeah.
I don't really get into them too much about like what the heavy things are, but like,
For sure.
the way you grow up and the way you're
Oh yeah.
you're raised.
Yeah.
I didn't have when I was a real little kid, it wasn't
Right.
always great.
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
I'll just say that. The rest of it doesn't matter. It's a moot it's a moot point. But I think the thing about for me in pursuing things and going after things in life is that if I had it's kind of like all right, comics. Let's do a comic reference.
Sure.
The Killing Joke. Joke, right? What's one of my favorite comics? That one.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it represents this dichotomy of what does it take to make a person crazy? Is one bad day. Bad day. And I think for myself, the inverse of like what made me quit, but what made me keep going was this idea that from a young age, I developed this mindset of this bad day won't be the day to break you. Because, I had innumerous opportunities to be like, no, I'm just going to go and do this. Like, I'm going to go fall into drugs, or I'm going to fall into heavy drinking, or I'm going to fall into, because all of those things from a very young age were around me, like from like 3 years old on. And so when you're around those things all the time, you kind of get to make the choice. What am I going to be? How am I going to be? And man, there's tons of opportunity, but I think, if we're going to say like what helped me push on, I kept saying yes to life. I kept saying yes to opportunity. A lot of the things where I've been in life have come from the fact that I was like, that sounds super duper weird.
Let's do it. Yeah. And so that was kind of the second part of the question. You sort of answered it. But yeah, it basically what we like to touch on is what keeps you going, what keeps you creating, what keeps you wanting to do this, so you kind of touched on that. So,
well, yeah. I mean, especially with like wrestling. So there was a time where I, 4 years ago, where I was going to be done with wrestling.
Yeah.
I was at a point where I didn't think I was giving wrestling what it deserved of me. Wrestling for me, like I said, it's almost midnight and we're here doing a podcast.
Yeah, man.
I've been at the gym how many days this week while working? I work 72 hours this week. I've got everything else that I'm doing. So what am I giving to wrestling? Like, there was a time where I said to myself, do I deserve to have people cheering for me? Am I giving enough to have the muscles in the ring? Am I giving enough to have the right gear in the ring? Am I crisp enough with my movements? Because I want to respect what wrestling is. I mean, I very much believe in the history of wrestling and the people who came before me. This chain I wear, it's in memoriam to Hercules Hernandez. It's like there are certain things about what I do, and like, do I even deserve this? So, I went to have a conversation with Mario and Paul, and before I could even say any words to them, Mario said to me, he was like, "Dude, when you get in the ring and you throw a headlock on somebody and you yell wrestling, because that is wrestling, and the people cheer back with you wrestling," he's like, "that's the greatest thing ever." He's like, "that entertains me." And I was like, he didn't know it. And I don't think I've ever even told him because, I don't know how to broach that conversation. But if he ever hears this, there he goes. But like that conversation is why I kept going, because it occurred to me that maybe what I was doing was worth it and people did appreciate it.
Awesome.
So here I am, man. X number of years later, rocking the title, talking to you, having fun, loving it.
Awesome, brother. All right. So I'm going to open the floor to you. You can tell the people where to find you. Anything else that you want to say? And yeah.
Yeah, no, so I mean, I'm on Instagram at the Bloodsaw, Facebook Buzz Bloodsaw. Follow PIPW in Connecticut, man. Follow AIWF. Follow, check out these guys I talked to you about earlier. Alan Compass, Sullivan, Jermaine Marbury, Corey Duke. Jekyll. Follow all these guys. Check them out. The thing I can say most to all the people at home, if you like entertainment, if you like wrestling, don't limit yourself and don't be afraid to have some fun and do something weird. Wrestling is fun, entertainment is weird, and it's okay to like both.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much. I think this is our longest podcast. So we talked for a while, brother. I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, man.
I want to thank Bloodsaw for coming. I want to thank Tyler and Emmy Studios. Get better, brother. I know you've got a lot of extra work to do because you're not here to produce this while we're recording it. So yeah, but I'm sure the finished product will be great. Thank you for everybody who's listening and watching, and we'll talk to you later. All right.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too. Hey everybody, welcome to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. Our guest this week is an artist, an author, a musician, a public speaker, like many of our guests, a man who wears many hats, journalist, Mr. Sean Parker. Thank you so much for coming, Sean. I appreciate it.
Hi there, Keith. Very happy to be here. Thanks a lot for that intro.
Absolutely. Happy to have you. So let's just get started out with when did you realize that you wanted to begin creating art and entertainment and things of that nature?
I don't know if I ever decided on it. I think I just understood at high school, that I was a creative at about sort of 14 when I discovered the work of like The Cure and Prince and Public Enemy and acts like this, things that were deeper into the pop culture. And I realized they were doing something visually and musically that I was very attracted to, that I saw was quite serious. And it's connected to pop art. So then I went into music and sort of joined bands and did the grunge thing. And then went to art school and started to expand it to painting, and these things all started to touch on each other. And I'm also a writer all the way through that, so just started to flesh it out. But started at about 14, I suppose, to answer it. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm wearing my Prince and the Revolution shirt today. So
there we
excellent.
go. Automatic connection.
Yeah, absolutely. So so you began sort of playing like grunge and rock music. This morning I was listening to the album that you put out earlier this year, and that's more of a collage, like a sound collage, electronic type piece of work. So how did you get from rock music and grunge and that sort of thing into the electronic music? How did that transition occur?
That's quite a journey, isn't it? Yeah, and
yeah, it is.
Well, back then, 1990, with the Nirvana hit here, just like they hit there, like a ton of bricks. And the band I was in, Sweet Assassin, we were called, which is school friends, were basically copying Nirvana and the Manic Street Preachers from here, doing that grunge thing and loving it, fab.
Yeah.
But then we went on with our lives, and I joined a funk rock band in Exeter, and then and then I went to art school where I didn't do music, I just did art. Then afterwards, I went to live in Istanbul for 10 years, and I got quite serious about the music and did the 3 albums and became a bit of a uh, artist in my own right. Became the biggest international act in Turkey, really. Um, During that process, and out there we were very art rock, for want of a better term. It was Talking Heads, Flaming Lips, everything were coming out in Britain, and all that brainy sort of deeper level of rock, and that is very much where I've stayed. That's what I always was, and when I came home 10 years ago, did a few more singles and things like that, and kept it going, but discovered the way you can make music over the internet and the collaboration with others in other countries with the file sharing and things like that, and then sampling. I've always been interested in sampling since Public Enemy and My Life in the Bush of Ghosts with Brian Eno and David Byrne. Amazing record from 80, which is still there. And I suppose that was a template for this Caucasian Nights, which I did this year. So there's lots of sampling, lots of beats, because I love my rhythms, and I've never really explored it until this record. So it's basically hip hop rhythms with my poetry, with some crazy sampling in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And so I hope that's a kind of a timeline of what happens. It's not pop, really.
Sure.
It's not pop. I do try, but it's not.
Yeah, it's a very interesting record. I was really getting into it this morning.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and the first 2 Manic Street Preachers albums were kind of seminal for me, because I was really into hard rock, like long hair, pop metal sort of. And then I heard those 2 albums, and it really kind of Generation Terrorists sort of bridged a gap between hard rock and punk. And then the second album, I can't think of what it's called right off my head, but
Gold Against the Soul.
That one, yes, thank you. Was a lot hookier than the first album. It had a lot more pop going, and it just kind of, to me at that age, in my early 20s, it kind of helped me explore other music. That and Violator by Depeche Mode, because that album was so undeniable. Like, it didn't really matter to me what kind of music you liked. Like, that Violator was just so beautiful. Like, so yeah. So you said that in between kind of your music, you started working on art at school, and I'm wondering what were some of your influences as an artist. It seems, I don't know, I'm no art critic. I love looking at beautiful things, but it seems like I pick up maybe a little bit of Van Gogh, sort of abstract stuff in your paintings. Is that fair?
It's fair. The good thing about art is that everything's fair.
Yeah.
I started to sketch things in school at the same time as the creative. I think I did Prince again on the cover of the Love Sexy album, where he's, it's a very striking picture of him, and I did that, and I started to do that kind of portraiture. Really loved it, but not seriously. And then about 10 years later, I went to art school here. Like, that was my degree, and I went to the University of the Creative Arts in Farnham here, and so that taught me that you can take art seriously. So I went there for 6 years, and I did my BA and my master's. And this picture behind me, if anybody's actually watching, is what the one of mine. So it's like, this is the place I've come to now. Back then, it wasn't quite so formalized. And I never took it. It's difficult to take art seriously when you're a work-minded person, because you're like, well, what you can take, but then you realize that you're really communicating something different, but by this thing. And the reason that I chose to do the fine art degree was because it was so broad-based. I went actually to art college to do the film and video. I wanted to be a director. Quite after my dad died at 97, I had a big sort of, right, what am I going to do with my life that I want to do? It was to be a director. But it changed quickly because I realized that wasn't quite for me, but painting apparently was. And I just loved, I could get in the zone for days and weeks and do these paintings and series of paintings. And I took some time out back in Istanbul. I tend to have these chunks of doing things, and I just did the music. And now when I came back, I got right back into the art again. Um, Patrick Heron is a big artist here. Picasso is a timeless reference for everybody, and some more obscure one like Kandinsky. I adore. He used to paint music, and that's always inspiring. As a person who tries to connect art and music, as I am, he used to paint the music as he heard it or as he remembered it, and he did these incredible abstracts off the back of that. So Kandinsky, Heron, Picasso, and Hans Hofmann, who's an amazing American abstract expressionist who people don't know very much about for the 50s. I discovered him when I was young, and he still sticks in my head now. Big slabs of color as canvases, and it's almost like the canvas becomes a sculpture. I love that guy. Hardly anyone knows him, which is a good reference to drop here, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Send people looking for things.
Yeah.
I can definitely see Picasso in the colors and the shapes as well. Just even looking at that behind you, like, yeah, it's awesome, man.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So, speaking of directing, you did I saw a brief mention of this in one article, so I'm not sure what exactly your role was, but you had some involvement in a play of some kind, right?
Well, yeah, I've been sort of touched on plays throughout my life because my dad was the drama lecturer at Exeter University, so he used to put us on the stage as children, doing little support roles and things. At art school, I was in a couple of the short films of other art students because I was a couple of years older as a mature student, but it's nothing that because I consider acting to be a serious art, which I'm not trained in. That's how I see acting. It's not a thing to be a celebrity. It's a serious, and I don't have those props. You know, you got certain things that you need to do. That's how I like to see acting. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of pretentious idiots, and I'm sure it's not that. You know, Kevin Spacey. So it's like, but a couple of years ago, I got into script writing. So I think what you're referring to is it's The Wolfstadt Wire is a script that I wrote during COVID time when we were locked up, and The Wolfstadt Wire it's a prisoner talking to a younger prisoner whilst the younger prisoner's having an affair with the older prisoner's assistant nurse type person. It's that kind of a menage a trois arrangement, and I was very proud of it. It was my first proper attempt at a play, and it won an award, won a Kostler Award Platinum, which is a nice thing. So that's the closest success I've had with the theatre world, really.
That's really cool, though. And so other writing that you've done, I'm really intrigued by the journalistic stuff. I saw that you did an interview. You've interviewed Ed Harcourt. He is an amazing artist, and I'm just curious what it's like to sit down with other creative people on your end and ask the questions and try to form something that is unbiased, but at the same time gives an insight into the person, like the character behind the music. Like, what is that like to do and to deconstruct? And
between 2010 and 18, I was doing interviews with music, and so Ed Harcourt, kind of half of them were email and the other half were in person. So the Ed one was email, for example. But I supported his band in Istanbul. He came out to do a show there, and I got on stage with him, and we went around town all that day. So we had that kind of a relationship. And then afterwards, we did a little interview for God Is in the TV. So I was able to ask a few questions, but that was 2010 now, so I can't really remember the in-depth amounts of it. But if I go to Julie Birchill, who's a writer, still going, who I adore, and I did an interview with her about a year later than that, and she just came out with the most fantastic quotes as she does about how she felt about the situation of world politics, because I knew I was able to go there with her and she would answer straight back. So that was a really good one from her time. And then the best sit down one was in Istanbul again with Sarah Blackwood, who's the singer of Dubstar, who were a big 90s band here. That's a lovely lady, and she was on tour in Istanbul, so I supported her again actually with my band, and we sat on the top of a Sultanahmet hotel and shot the breeze for half an hour. She told me all about her mental health journeys and the situation of the music industry going into Spotify world as we were in about 2012, 13. We're all sort of going, as was she. She's a multi-million selling artist going into 2010, when everything, as we all know, went like that in the music industry, which has now recovered, and it's completely unrecognizable, but it's recovered. So, that's the kind of thing that we riffed on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like physical media is slowly coming back. Like, I think even people who, records, vinyl has made a pretty big comeback in the last few years. It's to the point where vinyl is pretty much the most expensive kind of media you can buy as far as to listen to. I don't know if it's ever going to be the way that it was, where people actually sit down and listen to full albums anymore. But I guess that's just the world that we live in now, and you kind of have to adjust to it. But I still buy CDs and records, and I don't think I'll ever stop. It's just what I like. So,
good for you.
Yeah, and so you've written some novels as well. Just talk about that, I guess.
Yeah, they're not actually. I'm actually working on a novel at the moment, as in a narrative sort of story novel. The books I've done so far, including Delicate Balance of Reason, which is the last one, sitting there next to me, they're usually cultural theory, cultural studies of things that are going on in culture as the writer, because that's what I did at the end of my degree. Was the actual master's was in cultural theory, perspectives of intimacy in contemporary culture. And when I got back from Istanbul, I wanted to record to not lose it. I sort of put it into a book called Salt in the Milk, 10 Years in Istanbul. And so it's not like necessarily just talking about Istanbul, it's about the culture of the place at the time, as opposed to the 2,000 years of brilliant history. There's enough books like that. This was about what's happening at the moment there, and the tensions they have between the Ottoman past and the secular present, Islamifying present, that kind of thing. And also, and the music scene, which I was deeply involved with. So I tried to connect the contemporary music scene there, being an expat, with the complicated experience of being a Turk into arts there, as my friends were. So that's where that book came from. It's not a history of Istanbul, And then each year afterwards, I've kind of collected my thoughts each year. What am I writing about now? What am I doing? And put them into a book. And that's what I seem to have done, because I'm on the 9th since then. So,
well, there you go. So the novel that you're working on right now, is that going to be fiction or nonfiction?
It's fiction. So yeah, which is a massive, scary departure. The play I was talking about earlier was fiction, of course. So I've got an idea of where to go. But the craft of writing a novel, like acting, I see as very serious and there's a lot of gravity. There's no point in putting something out there if it's not the best thing you can do, I guess is what I mean. So I really want to make sure that it's completely right. When it comes to doing a song, you can put or a painting, you can put something out there that's completely crazy and go, someone might like it, but with something like a book, it's such a massive commitment that I personally want to make sure. So basically, I'm a bit nervous about it, but it'll probably come out next year, knowing me, because I'm always busy with something,
Yeah, I feel like with art, as far as the physical medium, like painting or photographs and things like that, and music as well, like you're touching on emotions, and you can emotions can be erratic and be crazy and be everywhere, and they're going to connect with someone, or they can be really calm and still connect with someone. With a book or with acting, there's sort of a method to it that's a lot more. Because I've tried writing books. It's not for me, but it's just hard. but I've acted some, and I've also made music, and it's
it's definitely, I don't know how to explain it, but it's more cerebral for me. Acting is than making music. Music comes from my gut and my heart,
Hmm.
and acting, I have to put myself in a place to do it. It's, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. I don't,
yeah, completely.
awesome. So what's the transition like going from nonfiction to fiction?
Uh, well, with the fiction, with the non-fiction, you have to gather up everything that you know, string it together, package it, conceptualize it, use your brain, your sort of left brain, if I may, to actually construct the cake and to make sure that it tastes good for the person reading it. That's the obligation of the journalist and cultural theorists. You know everything that's going on, you know what you want to communicate, but it needs to come out well for the person who's to not sort of switch off after two paragraphs. You want them to get sort of to the end as much as they possibly can. Um, with the fiction, it's much more of a putting yourself into the space of the painting, into the right brain of being in a dream world, really. But your fingers are working as you're typing, and they're sort of trying to keep up with the speed of your brain and you're the scenario, because you've gone into a scene, haven't you? And that scene, and you don't necessarily want to live there, but for this period, you want to get everything that you can out of it, see where it takes you, and then have the discipline to say, and that's enough. So yeah, opening up that part of your brain to a bunch of invented characters, or invented with hints of the real world, which is something lots of writers are doing now. You can almost tell who's being written about. But that's quite an exciting thing to do, and it's a bit of a challenge because it feels like such a luxury to just write fiction, or to paint. Is such a luxurious feeling thing, and I've still got the social, not socialist, but uh, the work ethos of doing things, and they need to have a purpose. I've always had a conflict about that in my head, of
Yeah.
having to have it do something. It doesn't have to do something, but I can't sort of help it. So I'm still working on that.
Yeah, that's interesting with art, because a lot of times you're creating art just for the sake of creating art, and
Mhm.
you're not even sure where it's going to go once you put it out there in the world. It's kind of up to the world to take it somewhere. So
That's it.
I
That's it.
yeah,
And there's a lot of stuff out there now, isn't there? So we're all aware of that. You know,
there is.
it's a good thing, but you need to have that edge. And
Yeah, for sure. So now, as far as your public speaking, I know that you do inspirational and motivational speaking. Um, and I think it's probably pretty obvious to people who are watching or listening to this that you have a bit of a stammer.
hmm,
And that's kind of what you focus on when you're talking. Is that correct with your public speaking?
that's essentially it. About 10 years ago, I did a TED talk in Istanbul, to stammering and creativity. Um, the stammer's sort of in a place that I'm comfortable with it now. I can communicate, and it's all right. But it's been there since I was 5, so I've had a big sort of journey with it, and I know all about it. So I was asked to do the TED talk in 2013, and I was thinking, what should I do it about? Because the organizer asked me, understanding I was a writer, and I just thought, what are the things that I know about that I can do for 15 minutes that will last for a long time, so it's not like just a pop moment. And stammering and creativity are things I do know, so I was able to talk about the left and the right brain speech production and the conflict in there, which can happen in a stammerer, and the pre-thought that we go through, and all that sort of thing. And that then I sort of published last year a companion piece to that, which was Compelling Speech. That was my last book. So very, very proud of that book. It's been the biggest seller, and it was the book version of that talk. And that TED talk that I did there, I came back to Britain and then did a couple more of those talks at universities and things here. Haven't done one for a couple of years. I think probably done for me now, but that was the main public speaking talking I was doing then.
I think I'm going to like I said this morning. I checked out some of your music. I think I'm going to have to look deeper into your work. Like I obviously haven't had time to read a book since we set this interview up, but
Oh no.
but I'm going to. I think you're a pretty interesting man. I'll just say that. You piqued my interest for sure. So, is there anything that you wanted to talk about as far as where people can find you and things that you've got coming up and that sort of thing?
Well, we've done a really good little tour of the stuff that I've been up to, which has been great.
Yeah.
Just about a month ago, I published A Delicate Balance of Reason on audiobook with me reading it. So I've the world of audiobooks, as your audience will be aware, is a booming one. So I'm hoping to do all those sort of 10 books in time on it. But we've done the last two, Compelling Speech and this one, they're on Audible. So if they want to go and pick one up, if they don't have time, everybody it's a different commitment, isn't it? Audiobook, nothing wrong with it at all. And if the person doesn't like text or doesn't have time or just likes the intimacy of me reading my book into their ear, then that's out now. So that would be nice. And the Caucasian Nights that we were talking about, this new album of mine, thank you for referencing it, because not a lot of people have talked about it. It's just not very, very high profile, but I'm very proud of it. And it's, it's quite difficult when you do lots of different sort of things, as I do, to put enough attention onto each of them. And the books have had a lot more sort of promotion and or Audible behind them and that kind of thing. But the albums are a different sort of story. You really have to do it yourself and go, look, listen to this, DJ, that kind of thing. So there's a different, what it's all about. There's a different kind of promotion angle to everything now. And it's all about X, as far as I can tell, and LinkedIn and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. It's tough because it does seem like social media is kind of declining now. And so it's harder to promote things. Like I remember when social media first started kind of opening up, I was so excited because I was like, I can get my stuff out there and everyone will see it, and there's a potential to reach all these people. And now you hear like people are leaving X and people are leaving Facebook and people are unhappy with Threads, which is the new Instagram version of Twitter. And it's just like, and I know there's Instagram creators actually, like the influencers who have been complaining about how fast their viewer counts have been dropping off, and it's just I wonder what the next thing is going to be. It's because it's got to be something. Like there has to be a way to get things out to people, but it seems like social media is sort of slowly fading at this point. So I'm curious.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's still, with the newspapers going down as they are, and X replacing the newspapers in Britain is the biggest. I sort of just read this morning that it's the most trusted and the biggest source of news in England right now. And
wow.
Obviously the Facebook is 2 billion around the world for years, and it's like there's something so disposable about the whole thing that it makes a proper creative sort of wretch. But at the same time, it's also it's a message maker to get your point to somebody who might get it, and the algorithm is sort of, I guess we have to confess, good for that, to creating an art rock sort of lover in England to an art rock lover in Canada, so
right.
Going, and by that it's hard to complain too much. But I do miss permanence, and I do buy book. I got loads of books over there. I don't enjoy to read. I'm very happy for people to read my ebooks, which exist. But personally, I need to buy the original thing if I'm going to do a review or if I'm going to just sit back and read. I just like the original thing. Very much with albums too. Though I do confess I've got now completely used to Spotify and YouTube. So, but my heart is completely with people like you and people supporting it in a physical way. That's great. I'm just a bit I don't know. I guess I've been sold to, but it's great that you can hear things in lots of different ways. Let me put it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I listen to Spotify every day. Like I can't say that I don't, but at the same time, I have a CD collection that has 5,000 CDs, and I probably have 120 albums. So I mean, it's yeah. I mean, and I'm never gonna stop collecting physical media, because even when honestly, the more that it gets phased out, the more is available to me, because people are selling their collections, so I can,
Right.
I can pick stuff up. So
It's interesting too, isn't it? How if you have an original copy of even a tape cassette from like 1982 or something for the Human League, for example, and in another 10, 20 years, someone's going to be so excited over that object, which back in our day would be like, this piece of crap, really? But now that's fascinating, isn't it? And even if it's completely torn up and not usable, they're going to like the object. I really love that, because that's an artifact becoming an artifact in history and time, despite the fact you can't listen to it on it anymore. It's the thing itself. I think that's really cool, and I'm surprised.
yeah, sure. Yeah. Do you remember the band 1927?
1927. No.
They were a pretty popular AOR band in England. Actually, they didn't really break in America, but they had
Gonna write it down and listen to it later.
a couple hits in England. But their album Ish is what it's called. ... ISH. I got that on cassette, sort of by accident, but I was like, it was kind of a happy surprise. And my son is 8. Well, 8 at the time, he's 9 now. And I played it for him, and he loved it. Like he thought, I don't know what it was, and he just wanted me to buy more tapes. He was like, this sounds so good. Like, he wanted me to get more cassettes because of that one 1927 cassette. But I think their biggest hit was a song called Tell Me a Story. It's a really good song. But yeah, they were an AOR band in the early to mid 80s in England that I believe they had some top 40 hits over there. I'm not completely positive because I'm not in England, but I know that in America they did absolutely nothing.
No.
So
Well,
yeah.
I also haven't heard of them. So, I'm gonna be having a listen this evening now. That's
Cool.
The great thing about this kind of thing is that I get to hear a new band that I'd never heard of.
Absolutely. Their singer has an amazing voice. I mean, if you like keyboards and guitar driven stuff with like a really smooth vocal, I mean, that's pretty much what they do. So,
Okay.
yeah. So, one thing that we like to present to all of the guests, there's hurdles in life and setbacks and everything. What is it that keeps you through the good and the bad wanting to create? What is it that drives you to be a creative person and to make art and to expose yourself to the world in that way?
Great question. I suppose it's because the creativity itself is your core, and you don't know that necessarily until you go through bad experiences, or the COVID, for example, or all sorts of situations we find ourselves in. It can be any kind of, perhaps a big sort of breakup. These things reduce you to your original sort of who am I? And when you have that and you realize that to write it out in a poem or a song or a painting, you feel better. And then you come back to that thing and go, wow, that thing is really raw and might not be perfectly stylistic or any of the things that you love in other people, but it's a really powerful piece in itself. And then you realize, wow, I can actually do that art, and it did work in that way. And the art is the expression of that. The creativity is absolutely core to the resilience that you reference. It is what it is. It is that thing. So it is for me anyway. I'm a bit of a super creative, as some of my friends call me. I realize that, but lots of people have this in them, and I always try and encourage it in them. And don't worry about how good it is, just do it. And that's usually people feel better, particularly with the writing out of their problem. Is a much better way than lots of other routes they could go down, I'd say.
Sure. Okay. So Sean, I want to thank you so much. This is I hope that my questions did you justice, because you are a very interesting man. You've done a lot of really cool stuff, and hopefully
Thank
some
you.
people will listen to this podcast and get directed towards you. And I know that they can find your books on Amazon and Audible. And I know you've got albums up on Spotify. I've seen a couple up there on Spotify this morning. So, yeah, I mean, I want to thank Tyler Martin and Emmy Studios. He's my producer. It looks like he slept in this morning, so he'll have some editing to do after we get this podcast recorded and sent over to him on the cloud. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm Keith, and we will talk to you guys again soon. Hey everybody, welcome to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. And this week we have a guest who is an author. He is a movie producer. He's a journalist. He's a podcast and TV host. I think that a lot of people should be familiar with him. And if you're not, we'll help you get a little more familiar with him today. Mr. Evan Ginzburg.
Great to be on. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. So, when you first started out creatively, you were a writer in the beginning, right? Is that?
Yeah, I was an early sheet writer, sheet as in dirt sheet, because at the time in the 80s, a lot of the wrestlers and promoters were not happy that people were quote unquote exposing the business. And later I started my own newsletter, Wrestling Then and Now. And it ran pretty much for 20 years. And Killer Kowalski was a columnist, and we had a lot of support from guys who understood we were honoring the business. I wasn't really doing news. I was doing more history and nostalgia and reminiscing. I first started going to wrestling 50 years ago, June 24, 1974, Madison Square Garden, Bruno and Jay Strongbow against Nikolai and Fred Blassie. So, I have 50 years of memories, and with other writers and such, we honored the business, and it's very different than the Observer or the Torch or other sheets of that era.
Yeah, and through kind of the nature of your newsletter, you mentioned Killer Kowalski did a column. You formed a relationship with quite a few people in the wrestling business, right? I remember seeing somewhere that you were pretty close with Nikolai Volkov, right?
Yeah, Nikolai, I would book as an agent. You see, what happens with the wrestling business is one thing always leads to another. And so I was doing Wrestling Then and Now newsletter, which became Wrestling Then and Now, the documentary, which you could watch on Tubi or Amazon Prime or whatnot, different platforms. And yeah, Nikolai is in the film, and he was a dear friend. And when my own mother died, Nikolai called, and just it means a lot when your heroes become friends. And so from being an agent, I was sitting with Nikolai Volkov and Johnny Valiant at an autograph signing in a wrestling store in New York. And by sheer coincidence, the executive producer of The Wrestler, Scott Franklin's best friend, so people get a little confused with these titles. Executive producer is the money guy, the guy who makes the deals, gets the movie financed, gets the movie made. So I'm sitting with Nikolai and Johnny, and they were very warm, funny, fan friendly, just good human beings. And so we're talking to the executive producer of the wrestler movies, best buddy. And he's like, we're doing this movie, The Wrestler. We think you guys would be perfect. And, exchange cards, exchange numbers, whatever. This happens 1,000 times at conventions and appearances. Yeah, 6 months or so go by. I hadn't heard anything. And, it was almost forgotten. Then all of a sudden, Darren Aronofsky, one of the world's greatest filmmakers, calls me and let's have a meeting. So I'm like, wow, this is real. And we go to meet Aronofsky and Scott Franklin and the screenwriter and a couple other guys from his crew. I bring Nikolai, Johnny Valiant, Tiger Khan, who wrestled for the Hearts up in Calgary, Nikita Brezhnikov, who was Nikolai's shoot manager. He would take him on the road for appearances, just like I did with Johnny Valiant. And we just hit it off. I mean, these guys were telling road stories, and the Aronofsky and the crew just were enamored. These guys were 80s Hulkamania, rock and wrestling, Vince's expansion era fans. And he has two of the guys that were there, Johnny V and Nikolai Volkov. And so next thing I know, I get offered, would you like to be the associate producer on The Wrestler, which is the wrestling guy. I was the wrestling guy. I brought in Mickey Rourke's trainer, his stunt double. I did a half dozen casting calls with over 100 different wrestlers. I brought in Ron Killings, Romeo Roselli, a ton of indie guys. I brought in Afa, who just passed. Afa helped train Mickey, and Afa's boys helped train Mickey. And so I know that's a long-winded answer, but what I'm trying to show is one thing always leads to another. And it's been an interesting ride, and it still is.
Yeah, that's sort of the theme of the whole podcast. Like, we follow people's creative journeys, and it's always, you start out with one thing, and then that goes to another thing, and then it continues on, and then the next thing you know, you might be doing something that you never dreamed you were going to do. Like, I'm sure that when you started your newsletter, you didn't think you were going to be involved in making a movie with Mickey Rourke. I mean, I'm sure that was
making a movie where he was nominated for the Academy Award and won the Golden Globe Award, Best Actor in the entire world. So I'll tell you another funny story. I'm on set one day. We were shooting in 2008, I believe it was, and I'm on set, and all of a sudden, Aronofsky gets this smirk, and he goes, "Evan, come here." And I go, "Yeah." And this is that autograph scene. And he goes, "I have no makeup, nothing. I'm just standing there." And he goes, "Evan, work the room, walk up to Mickey last, ask him for a autograph and a Polaroid." So Mickey walks up to me, whispers in my ear, he goes, "Just improv it." He thinks I'm an actor. I'm not an actor. So it was the only actual pro wrestler that was in that scene was Johnny Valiant, who I brought in. Manny Yarborough was there also. He was a black sumo who fought in UFC. He was a friend of mine. Wonderful guy. He's gone now also. A lot of these guys are gone.
Yeah.
So I'm walking around the room. I walk up to Mickey last. The whole time I'm thinking, what am I going to say to him? Because we're improving it. And I say to him what I would to any, legendary wrestler. I said, "I loved you as a kid. I saw you at the Garden, Madison Square Garden. Can I have your autograph?" And he looks at me And he goes, "What's your name?" So now I'm thinking, and I go, "Evan." So how surreal this is. I'm playing myself in a fictional movie. Absolutely surreal.
Yeah.
So jump ahead, we're, we're at the New York Film Festival, Lincoln Center, 2,300 people, sold out, $40 a ticket. And I'm in the audience with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. This was a long time ago. I'm in the audience with her. I don't know if I made the cut or not. I'm not editing the movie. I'm the wrestling guy. So I'm sitting there like anybody else watching the movie. And all of a sudden, I come on screen and she looks at the screen and she looks at me and she looks back at the screen and she goes, "That's you. That's you." How bizarre this whole thing was. So another quick story, the night of the New York Film Festival, which is a very prestigious festival. We worked on this film off and on for 7 years. 7 years. People have no idea what goes into making, a quality film. And I'm looking around. It's the scene where Mickey and his daughter are having this really heated discussion, and he goes, "I'm just a broken down piece of meat." And everybody around me is crying. Everybody around me. And I go, "Wow, it works. It works. You can't fake crying." These were just people watching the film in the audience. And we walked out, and, tons of paparazzi, and it was. I tell people it was the best day of my life. The New York Film Festival when we first screened it. Am I allowed to curse on your show?
Sure. Yeah.
So the at the after party, the film is all done. It's in the can. Aronofsky was a very down-to-earth, laid-back guy. His mom was a school teacher. He's not a rich kid born with a silver spoon. His mom was a New York school teacher. So he said he does a little speech, and I'll never forget it. He says, quote, this is a quote, I'm not paraphrasing. He goes, "I don't know what the fuck we have, but we have something."
Ah.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. And man, he was right because critical acclaim, the Golden Globe for Mickey, the Academy Award nomination. It did 36 million domestic, which is nothing if you compare it to a Marvel superhero movie, but it was shot on 6 million, which is nothing. It was an indie film. A lot of those scenes, those were real fans. At one Ring of Honor show, the fans were angry that we were interrupting to film. It was like guerrilla filmmaking. So Aronofsky actually gets on the mic to the crowd and goes, guys, we just need one more quick take. We'll be out of here. We'll do you proud." Because they just wanted to watch their wrestling. They weren't interested in us. They wanted to see Nigel McGuinness and all these guys, Daniel Bryan, Brian Danielson at the time. And all these great guys who became legends were in Ring of Honor that era. So yeah, so it was a great experience, and I there's a lot of joy and pain. I have a love-hate relationship with everything wrestling related, but that was one of the joys.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed, I mean, obviously we're friends on Facebook, and I've been a Facebook friend of yours for years now. And your opinion on the at least the popular wrestling, like the TV wrestling, has kind of soured over the years.
Well, I sat with Aronofsky at a meeting, and at one point we actually met with Nicolas Cage because we couldn't raise the money we needed with Mickey. And Nicolas Cage, circa 2007, 2008, when we were working on this Hot and Heavy, he was a huge star. I mean, top box office.
Yeah.
And one day, I'm just sitting alone with Aronofsky, and he says to me, "Evan, Mickey's the right guy," because he looked beaten down. Mickey was in the 80s, 20 years earlier. He was a top box office guy, sex symbol, matinee idol, whatever you want to call it. He gets disillusioned with Hollywood and goes off to box, to box. He's getting punched in the face. This is unheard of in Hollywood. It's unheard of. Okay.
Yeah.
So my point being, Aronofsky went with the art, not with the money. And I was very impressed, because Nicolas Cage, who looked great at the time, he was in his 40s and he looked fit. And I spent an evening with him. I took him down the Ring of Honor, and we go backstage, and he's like, "Is this real?" He thought it was. He said, "Is this like UFC?" That's how convincing. And he knew nothing about wrestling, but that wasn't the reason he didn't get chosen ultimately. Ultimately, Mickey was the right guy, as everybody could see. But my point is, I would say honestly, 90% of what Vince churned out was instantly forgettable vanilla pablum, and Triple H is lauded as the savior. I would say 80% of what he churns out is crap. I'm watching SummerSlam, 7 matches, 7 screw job finishes. CM Punk and Drew McIntyre are fighting over a friendship bracelet. The brain cells were just dying. I'm watching this. I mean, thousands of brain cells were seeping out of my head. And then is Dom going to kiss Liv or Rhea? Is Dom going to leave with Liv or Rhea? I'm like, I go back to like Stan Hansen breaking Bruno's neck and you have a blood feud. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm not, let me just throw this in. I'm not one of these guys who does there's no good wrestling since the territories. I think Gunther is great. That guy's totally old school. I think Cody's great. I think on the right night when Reigns showed up, he barely wrestled. He could be great. So I'm not one of these guys that just, tosses the baby out with the bathwater. I thought at WrestleMania over the 2 days, there were 4 excellent matches. The 2 Cody matches, Bailey's match, and Gunther's match. Gunther always comes through with a great match. But SummerSlam, to watch 7 screw job finishes, and it insults your intelligence. And there wasn't one match I would qualify as great. Gunther's match was very, very good, but the stupid ending, takes it down a notch as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I started watching wrestling in '78, so I was a few years behind you, but
Yeah.
but I definitely get what you're saying. It was presented as more of uh, a physical struggle. Today there's definitely a big emphasis on the story, and the match is kind of secondary, which I don't like. I mean, for sure. I prefer my favorite wrestling promotion of all time is the AWA. So, I mean, that's where I'm at.
I saw the AWA in New Jersey. They would come in Pro Wrestling USA and AWA.
Right.
Saw Bockwinkel against Zbyszko. Bockwinkel was amazing, and he wasn't a kid at the time. And I'll tell you, over the years, I've interviewed tons and tons of wrestling legends, and they said to me many times they felt that Prime Ray Stevens was the greatest of all time. Prime Ray Stevens.
Yeah, wrestlers really respected him a lot. Yeah, I used to watch it. I'm from upstate New York, so I used to watch it on WPIX when I was a kid. Yeah, we used to get it out there. But yeah, there's definitely been a big shift from the wrestling in the '70s and even the '80s. Because the '80s was cartoony, but I mean, you'd still get good physical matches. You just don't really get that anymore.
I loved Heel Piper. Heel Piper was unbelievable. He'd come out at the Garden headline. The match was 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes. You didn't know what he was going to do second to second because he didn't know what he was going to do second to second. It was just like it was like a tornado hit the ring, and then it was over, and you could breathe again. It was so exciting.
Yeah,
Piper and Orton together. Cowboy Bob Orton. They were amazing, but jump ahead by 86, 87, it was pretty much a cartoon. And by the late 80s, it was all, characters. This guy's a plumber, and this
Yeah,
guy, I mean, it just. So I started going to the NWA in Philly and Baltimore and other places monthly. And I tell people the NWA mid to late 80s, even up to 89 with Terry Funk and Ricky Steamboat. I'm like, that was the best live wrestling I ever saw. NWA live, especially in Philly every month.
sure.
Flair and Ricky Steamboat at the Meadowlands. That was the best match I ever saw in 50 years.
Yeah, I actually I saw the NWA in Syracuse
Yeah.
at the fairgrounds. I was probably 14 or 15 years old, and man, that card top to bottom. The main event was Ricky Steamboat, or not Ricky Steamboat, sorry, Terry Funk and Ric Flair.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean,
Can't
yeah,
beat
that
that.
was, yeah, for sure. And Muda and Sting wrestled on that show, and
Yeah.
oh man, yeah, it was great wrestling, and it was uh I don't know, it was definitely different than the WWF, where there was a lot of stopping and starting, and I don't know.
Well, in the NWA, it was feuds and blood and the finish in the cage or whatnot.
Yeah,
Um, I tell people you had Flair on top, you had the Horsemen, you had the Russians, you had Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express. You had guys like Jimmy Valiant and Superstar Billy Graham who headlined the Garden, Madison Square Garden. Those guys were mid-card in the NWA for the most part. It
yeah,
was you had Rick Rude, Manny Fernandez low on the card. That's how talent laden, the NWA was that era. Barbarian. Oh, it was. They had such a great talent roster, and I tell people Midnight Express and Rock and Roll Express, those were some of the greatest tag matches I ever saw. And Midnight
absolutely.
Express is my favorite tag team of all time.
Mine too.
Oh, there you
Mine
go.
too.
Brilliant
Yeah,
minds think alike. There you go.
absolutely.
There you
I
go.
think that the stuff that the Midnight Express did, um, doing double team wrestling, double team maneuvers during the match, not just saving it for the finish, but
Yeah.
in the flow of the match, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Like watching them work together while the match is going on. There's not a lot of teams that do stuff like that. The Motor City Machine Guns
Yeah.
are
They're
really good
always
at
great
tandem
also.
moves during the match. Yeah. But there's really not a lot of teams who incorporate tag team maneuvers in the flow of a match like the Midnight Express could do. It was beautiful to watch, man.
Yeah, whether it was Condrey, who was more meat and potatoes, or
Yeah.
Lane, who was flashier, both the teams were great with Eaton and Cornette. And then you
Yeah.
had Big Bubba. It was just a perfect combination because Bobby was no talker, but he was as great as anyone that ever stepped foot in the ring. That guy was amazing.
Absolutely.
Super nice guy. I've met him several times, and what a shame he's gone. A lot of these guys, long trail of, lost guys along the way. Tough business.
Yeah, I was watching SummerSlam 92 the other night for a podcast that I do with some guys, and it's just amazing like how many of them have passed away, and
Well, if you break it down, I mean, some people tend to disagree with me sometimes, but we did a documentary, 350 Days, and about half of the guys in the movie, which came out 5, 6 years ago, they're gone at this point. And the
yeah,
title came from the fact that the NWA champs wrestled literally 350 days. And while we were making the movie, Bret Hart said at his peak he was doing 330 days, and Greg Valentine, who's in the film, told us he did 320 days. So it's not any kind of like huge exaggeration.
right,
So you're on the road 350 days, 330, 320, whatever the case may be. You're eating crap. You're in different time zones, different days. When the WrestleMania era hit, you're crisscrossing the country. A lot of these guys couldn't handle it. Like guys like Barry Windham, they just like, I quit. I'm getting
yeah,
out of here. It's insane, and you can't blame them. So imagine the toll that takes, and then you get hurt. You get hurt. It's inevitable. You know, wrestlers hate the term fake. Why? They'll go, my shoulder replacement wasn't fake. My hip replacement wasn't fake. My 3 divorces weren't fake. My kid not talking to me because I was never, ever at home isn't fake. So, you know, so you get hurt. You're scared you're going to lose your income. You're going to lose your spot. Your wrestling hurt. So now the painkillers come in or whatever you need to get you through the night, to get you to the next town, to get you through the next match. I'll tell you the craziest story. The Valiant Brothers, who were #1 tag team in the world, they're wrestling. Jimmy pulls out a blade. By accident, he nicks Johnny in the eye. Not the eye, the eyeball. In the eyeball, not around the eye. So now he's wrestling in the match and he's blind in one eye. Okay? But this is your bread and butter. You can't just, walk to the dressing room. So he wrestles blind in one eye. The punchline to the story, he wrestles a match the next night blind in one eye, and then finally goes to the doctor. And luckily it was repairable, It just
Yeah.
like slightly, touched him in the eye, but the guy was blind. So, you're scared to lose your spot. And then you get the guys who they're 500, wrestling books and 5,000 shoot interviews in, and they think they understand all of this, and they go, "Oh, they all pissed away fortunes on wine, women, and song." Some of these guys never broke 100 grand ever. Okay, the money came during the Hulkamania era. Before that, you had guys who headlined around the world, didn't break 100 grand, 3 meals a day, gas, tolls, food, taxes, sending money home to support your family. They did not, quote, all piss away fortunes.
Yeah.
It's absurd. And it just becomes like a myth that's perpetuated. Sure, there's guys who made a lot of money and blew a lot of money. That's any industry. But you can't say all, you know. These
Yeah.
these guys all should have had pensions and health benefits. That's what they all should have had. Yeah.
Yeah. Jesse Ventura has been fighting for that for forever. Like I remember even during the 80s, he was a big like wrestling should be unionized guy. Like he's been on that for a really long time.
And then you have the guys who snitch him out, and
Yeah.
he said Hogan. I'm just quoting him,
Yeah.
so don't be mad at me if you're a Hogan fan. And and it doesn't happen because the guys on top who are making big money, they don't want they don't want anything to change. I'm the
Right.
boss's boy, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that decades later, you're talking 40 years later, there's still no unions and pensions, and
Right.
it's a shame. And today, at least, the top guys are making good money, but the indie guys are still a hot dog and a handshake, and if you get $25 or $50 or whatnot, you're lucky, and so there's still a lot of exploitation. I mean.
Yeah. 350 days. I mean, I've watched a lot of shoot interviews and things like that, but I think 350 days is probably the rawest documentary I've ever seen. Like it's really honest. You never see Bret Hart open up like that. Like the stuff that he said in that documentary, you would never expect him to say. Like that was me personally watching it. I was shocked by the stuff that Bret Hart talked about.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I'll tell you exactly what happened. Right after doing The Wrestler, I did a documentary on wounded warriors. I didn't want to be typecast as just a wrestling guy. So another Darren Antola approaches me to do 350 days. And at first, I really wasn't interested because you just can't top the wrestler. You know, no matter what you do, you're not going to top the wrestler. So I could see he's talking from the heart. He's like, God, I love Piper and Orndorff and like the guy. It was like, you know, he's like reading my mind. And so, and he's a blue collar guy, honest guy. You know, he's not a rich movie guy, and he just loved wrestling. So as we went through the process, I finally said yes. You know, let's do this. But I said documentary that everybody does where you go into the fanboy's house and there's 10,000 action figures. And I said, let's let these guys pour their hearts out. Pour their hearts out.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We had superstar Billy Graham, Bret Hart. God, let me just rattle off some of the guys who were gone.
Please.
Yeah, Larry Sharp, the Wolfman, King Kong Mosca, George the Animal Steel, Paul Orndorff. I mean, so many of these guys are gone at this point. Lanny Poffo, who was a dear friend, Nikolai, they're all in this film, and so many of them, you know, we lost them along the way, and it's like nobody was like tracking down the Wolfman for a movie, so we got him on film, and yeah, so we're very proud of it, and so Michael Burlingame, the editor. He was not a wrestling guy. And I said to Darren Antola, I said, this is our guy, because he's not going to say, this guy's, you know, a star and this guy's an undercard guy. I don't even like to use the word jobber because people, you know, it's disrespectful. That's a different conversation. But so I said, this is our guy. He worked with Paul McCartney, Mariah Carey, Sting, not Sting the wrestler, Sting from the Police. And I said, this guy is going to go from the heart, like, what's the most powerful, poignant? And I said to him before we did this, I said, make a movie where an 80-year-old woman who never liked wrestling, make her cry. I said, that's the movie I want to make. You don't need let's go down to the training school and see them put the reporter in an armbar. This shit's been done 1,000 times.
Right.
I said, let these guys pour their hearts out. So there's a segment on injuries and, like, you know, Stan Hansen and these guys, they're pointing to like every part of the human body that's been broken, that's been surgically repaired. And the punchline to the whole movie is at the very end, guys like Billy Graham. Graham's actually laughing. He goes, would you believe I do it all over again? All the suffering, all the pain. Because Lanny Poffo would always say to me, Evan, I saw the world on the promoter's dime. Yeah. I mean, wrestling has taken me, you know, around the world to different places, just from, you know, film screenings and agent work and such. And yeah, so I've met some of the greatest people, closest friends in the world through wrestling. And I've met people I wouldn't spit on if they were on fire. You know?
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story. I booked Johnny Valiant to wrestle Jimmy Snooker on a New Jersey indie. This is probably 20, 25 years ago. It's all a blur.
Wow.
So they're both in their 50s at the time. They're not what they were, but it's still Johnny Valiant and Jimmy Snooker, and they still have something left in the tank. So they put on a really good match, you know, not what it would have been 10 years earlier, but they put on a really good match. Johnny pulls out a New York City Metro card and rakes Jimmy across the eyes, and Jimmy sells it like he's dead, you know? So the punchline to the story, the place is packed. The match was good. Everybody had a good time. It was the main event. And we go to get paid, me as the agent, to get Johnny's money. The Herculean sum of $350. And the promoter's doing the, guys, you know, it wasn't a good house tonight. Can you take a little less? And I'm like, listen, every seat was full. You know, he transed himself in here to get to the show. Give him what you promised him.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, at the time, I'm a mild-mannered school teacher / agent, and I'm the guy, you know, give the guy his money. I'm like the, you know, and and knowing that you'll never work for the promoter again because you stood your ground and and this happened many, many times. I'm talking getting on planes and going to places and not getting what you were promised, or, you know, there were times we would work conventions and he'd be signing autographs and, you know, there's nobody there because they didn't promote it well. They, you know, they screwed up or whatnot. And the legends, it's like the WWE Hall of Fame. The legends are online, and the promoter's getting the cash from the door because he didn't have, you know, the money that he promised everybody. And you're going from 20s to 10s to 5s to 1s, and
Oh man.
you're hoping that by the time you get to the front of the line, there's enough cash left to get
Yeah.
paid. So you wonder why I have a love-hate relationship with all of this. And I do the agent stuff a lot less than you know, I used to, especially post-COVID. Yeah, it could be a very ugly business, and
Yeah.
I you know, I mean, I could tell you horror stories from here to tomorrow, but I could tell you funny
Yeah.
stories from here to tomorrow. I mean, this is 50 years being involved with this in one capacity or the other.
Sure.
Yeah, 9/11, 2003, 2 years to the day after the fact. I have Johnny Valiant booked in Philly at a convention, and we're on this little puddle jumper 20-seater from Philly to New York. And it's 2 years to the day. The pilot looks like Lee Van Cleef. You know, the pilot looks rough. He looks
Oh
rough. He
man.
looks like a bad guy in an action film. So we're like, is this guy gonna send us into the ocean? He didn't look like a pilot. You know, a lot of these guys are clean cut. You know, and
Right.
this guy looked like Lee Van Cleef. That's the best way I could explain it. So
Sure.
we're hitting turbulence and we're looking at each other. You know, like, is this it? It's like I'm gonna be the asterisk, like. Wrestling legend
Right.
Johnny Valiant goes down in a plane, and like my name will be in little letters in the obit, you know.
Yeah.
So obviously that's not what happened, but that's a funny story. I mean, there's
Sure.
so many memories, the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of it, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So to back things up just a little bit,
Sure.
um you you adapted pretty well to the digital age, from writing your sheet, and then now you're on the internet with websites and whatnot. What was that transition like, especially for someone who's so old school, like coming into, like, print is almost a dead media at this point. So how was that?
Very, very difficult because I'm not particularly tech savvy, and I always had to rely on others, and like any quote unquote employee, and many times they were friends who just wanted to help and you would pay them, whatever the case may be. You know, we did Legends Radio, and we did Evan Ginzburg's Legends TV, etc., so on. And I was always reliant on other people. And you know, you're doing a show today. One of my engineers died at age 34. Guy just died. You know, he had a stroke, and that was it. So, you know, you always had to, you know, like right now I'm doing a monetized Facebook page, Evan Ginzburg's Old School Wrestling Memories, and that I can handle. That I can handle. But if
Yeah.
you gave me something elaborate like shooting a TV show or whatnot, you know, I just wouldn't have the tech skills. So, but over the years, it's been a joy for the most part until things come crashing down at some point because either somebody many times with projects, what people don't understand is it's a team effort, no matter what the project is, a movie, a TV show, even a podcast. It's a team effort. And everybody has to be on the same page, and everybody has to be reliable, and everybody, has to agree to, what is the goal here? What are we trying to do? I mean, there's a zillion podcasts that just ad nauseum go over. Let's go over every match on Raw, every match on SmackDown, every match on AEW TV, and to me, it's stultifying. I mean, because I watch AEW, and I would say I enjoy a chunk of each show, and a lot of it is, I, I could live without it, but I don't need to overanalyze every match that I just saw. I mean, I don't get it. I really don't get
Yeah.
it. But so if the host has this idea and the co-host has a different idea and the engineer has another idea, you have a dilemma. So basically, it has to be people who have the same vision, the same goal, the same, and also what comes into play many times is money. Money. It's like, well, if we water down this, we can make more money. And the purist will go, I don't want to turn this show into crap. But the other guy will go, but we're spending all this time and effort and money to do this. We should be making money. And this becomes a whole thing. So many times, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, when people go, well, SummerSlam was a huge financial success, I go, okay, but if I didn't enjoy it and it's so overpriced that it eliminates a chunk of the audience who can't even afford to take their wife and kid or kids, there's that end of it too.
Yeah.
And if Triple H at the press scrum boast how he broke the record-breaking gate, meanwhile, superstar Billy Graham and Bushwhacker Butch and Virgil and a ton of your guys who just died needed GoFundMe's to be buried or for their hospital bills. How about taking a chunk of that enormous profit like the NFL and set up a fund? Take 1% or half of 1% of your billions and help your pioneers and legends who never got paid what they should have to begin with. So it's all about money, okay, but I'm telling you the other side of it,
Yeah, I mean it's easy to set attendance records when you're charging, or not attendance records, but financial records when you're charging astronomical amounts of money. I mean, it's not that impressive. It's just like every time a brand new movie comes out, it breaks the box office revenue
they
record.
charge more.
Well, yeah, that's because tickets are like $20 a piece now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they don't ever adjust it for inflation or anything. They just brag.
Yes. So at WrestleMania 40, which was okay, like I said, there were two excellent matches each night. The rest I could have easily lived without. WrestleMania 40, VIP ringside packages were starting at $23,000. Starting at $23,000. At SummerSlam, just a regular seat, not a package, ringside, $966. 900. If I spent over $40 for that show, I would have been pissed off.
Yeah.
SummerSlam. I mean,
Man.
I don't get it. It actually, honestly, I do kind of get it. I think religion is on the wane today. And I think for some of these guys, this is their religion. They have no other interest. It's like a religious pilgrimage. They'll cross an ocean for a pay-per-view, spend thousands and thousands of dollars. And honestly, you can't tell me everybody in a massive arena, 50,000 plus people, you can't tell me they're all rich. Somebody, it's an addiction. They're maxing out credit cards. They're going to get in trouble. Not everybody has 23 grand or even $966 for a wrestling ticket. Come on.
Yeah, for sure. I am trying to go to the Royal Rumble. A bunch of my friends want to go because it's in Indianapolis and I'm in Southern Indiana, but I'm worried about the financial toll that it's going to take on my wallet if we actually go and get decent seats. And yeah,
Well, if you
yeah,
really need to be there, I'm not big on the Rumble because inevitably there's 30 guys and 27 don't have a shot in
yeah,
hell.
I hate that.
And,
Yeah,
and many
that's how
times
Jim
who's
Duggan.
going to win because
Yeah,
the booking's predictable. But
right.
you could try StubHub or TickPick at the last second, or just buy
Sure.
a seat in the nosebleeds, and they have giant screens. I mean,
Right.
I wouldn't cash out the kids' college fund. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
some of these geniuses probably do.
Right. I always say when they talk about the Rumble, Hacksaw Jim Duggan would never win the Royal Rumble now. Like adding the stipulation that the winner goes to WrestleMania,
Yeah, and
it makes it
you know
so
what they're looking
predictable.
towards.
Yeah, it makes it so predictable. Um, so yeah, I used to really like the Rumble, and there's been some good moments over the years, but now it's really, really predictable. You always know who's gonna win. Like it's just yeah, it's silly.
And
Um,
and, and between the men, the women do it also, right?
yeah, yep,
Yeah, so
yeah. The women do it now too.
between the two of them, it's like endless. It's like,
Yeah, yeah. You're looking at 2 hour plus long matches,
and
and then they're gonna do at least three
if you know
more.
who's gonna win, it's a long hour just to sit.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you
Um,
just want to spend a weekend with your buddies, you see what's
yeah,
fun. What's fun is like we book talent into WrestleCon over the years, guys like Orndorff and Tito and Greg Valentine, and we would go to different indie events, and you can have a nice weekend. There's no what I find interesting with WWE pay-per-views or premium live events or whatever you want to call them.
right,
What I find is there's no guarantee Royal Rumble is going to be better than the previous one or the one after. It's all kind of hit and miss. I mean, you could get lucky and see a classic match on any given night, and other nights it's just kind of all instantly forgettable.
yeah. So, before we hop off here, I wanted to also talk about your books. Are they novels or are they nonfiction? Or I know you've published a couple of books. How did that come
I wrote a
about?
book, Apartment 4B, like in Brooklyn. It's a short story collection, nonfiction, about growing up the only white kid on the block in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, in the 1960s and 70s. Yeah, it's a nonfiction short story collection. I'm working on a similar project, but it's not quite done yet. And I'm also working with Dr. Mike Lano, who is the president of the John Tolos fan club, on John Tolus's biography. And history hasn't been kind to Tolos because the geniuses at the Olympic Auditorium taped over. They taped over each TV show to save $25 on the tapes. So
Cool.
there's not a lot of footage of the guy. But when I was a kid, Tolos was as great a heel. You can't imagine how great this guy was.
Yeah,
So at Madison Square Garden in '74, Tolos came in to wrestle Bruno. I mean, he was a huge, huge star, but you don't hear a lot about him. But for those who don't know, he was as great a promo guy as anybody. He was always in shape, but he was a normal sized guy, like
right.
5'11", 6 feet. He wasn't like a monster, but so he was a normal sized guy. He wasn't the best wrestler in the world, but he was so entertaining and so exciting. An innovator. He brought a snake in the ring years before Jake the Snake,
Yeah.
etc. So on. So they did a gimmick where Tolos blinds Fred Blassie. He throws powder in his eyes, and they actually bring Blassie to a real hospital to sell it back then.
Right.
And so they end up wrestling in a stadium in LA, and they draw 27,000 people, and it's on closed circuit in movie theaters, like the Muhammad Ali fights of the era. This is how big Tolos was, and that's before WrestleMania, closed circuit. And so I think he's more than worthy of a book. Everybody and his mother has a wrestling book today. So, but like anything else, you know, you try to do it right, and it takes a lot of time. But that's a labor of love. You're not going to get rich on a Tolos book because half his fans are
Sure.
dead by this point.
Yeah.
You know, Tolos
Yeah.
goes back. He's been dead. He's been dead a while. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember Tolis. I don't know. Do you remember the California wrestling that used to come on MSG every once in a while on the MSG network in the 80s?
From the Olympic Auditorium,
With
Tolos.
Rocky Johnson and
Yeah. That.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I remember watching him on that.
Yeah.
And then of course, I remember him coming to the WWE as the coach for Mr. Perfect, and
That was a disaster.
yeah, it was pretty bad.
Well, what happened? What happened was he was in his late 50s at the time. He was still in shape, and
Yeah,
you know,
so they had to put
but
him in a tracksuit.
yeah.
So
So
yeah,
Vince doesn't want him wrestling. Vince doesn't want him taking bumps, and then Vince says, "I don't want you talking." He's one of
yeah,
the best promo guys in history. You know,
yeah,
Vince gets ideas, and sometimes they're brilliant, and sometimes they're idiotic. I mean, you have one of the greatest promo guys ever, and we don't want you talking. Just blow the whistle. That'll be annoying. That's your gimmick.
yeah.
So he's miserable. It doesn't get over, and next thing you know, he's out on his ass. He had a better run with Herb Abrams of all people in UWF because at least they let him be Tolis, you know.
Right. Sure.
He's a good.
Sure.
He was heel managing. He's getting in his licks. He's doing the promos. So Tolos, when he came in to wrestle Bruno, he gets on TV and he does a set of tapings to promote the match. And he calls Bruno a spaghetti bender. Spaghetti bender.
Sure.
Back then, this is like hot stuff. And
Right.
Bruno's seething. He insulted my nationality. You know?
Yeah.
And it's a different time, you know. Today you'd have to do 36 high spots to get the heat that one word got, you know.
Right. Right. For sure. For sure. So, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up here. We like to try to keep the shows under an hour for so the fans aren't sitting there for 100 years. But
I could do 3 hours if you ever want
sure,
me back.
yeah, I can tell. So we've already kind of touched on it, but I'm gonna go ahead and open the floor up to you. Where can we find you and right now on the internet or wherever?
Well, check out Evan Ginzburg's Old School Wrestling Memories on Facebook. I am the senior editor over at ProWrestlingStories.com. We have 1,000 articles on wrestling's rich history, and I wrote about 75 or so of them. I lose count. And usually when I write, it's on somebody I knew, and it's from the heart, you know, burying friends, unfortunately. And but there's 1,000+ articles on there, ProWrestlingStories.com. Check out Wrestling Then and Now, the documentary on Tubi, Amazon Prime, other platforms, 350 Days, as we were talking. I don't think I really need to plug the wrestler.
Yeah, probably not.
But man, thank you for your support. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
It's very therapeutic doing a show like this. It's, you know.
Yeah, yeah. One last thing before we go. We always
No
like
rush,
to
no rush.
we always like to ask the guests this, sort of to wrap things up. What keeps you going? Like wrestling is obviously up and down, and you kind of have a love-hate relationship with it. But what keeps you creating, from the writing to the movies to the wrestling commentary? Like what keeps you going with all of this?
Um, there was a movie called Once. It's a beautiful film. It's
I
about
love that movie.
what a great movie. What a
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
street musicians in Europe. And they shot it on 125 grand. And they win the Oscar. The band is called the Swell Season. Tremendous musicians. And I'm more an R&B, blues, jazz guy. And this but anyway, so they're at the Academy Awards. They're talking in front of 1 billion people, and they go, create art. Create art. Don't create content. Don't create schlock. Okay? Create art. And my friend said to me, and I hadn't really thought about it. He said, when Aronofsky put you, meaning me, actually into the wrestler acting, he said that was his gift to you. Because long after we're all gone, people will be watching that. So, when people go, oh, WWE's making billions, create art. Gunther creates art. Cody on the right night creates art. You know, so that's what really keeps me going. I don't do anything for the money because honestly, you don't get rich from any of it. It's not about the money. It's about pouring your heart out, whether it's the printed page, whether it's on film. The best film I've seen in this century, 21st century, is a little indie called Wendy and Lucy with Michelle Williams, shot on pennies. It's about this poor girl. All she has is a dog and a broken down car. This heap. And all of a sudden, she has no money. The car breaks down and it sets off a chain reaction. And it's heart wrenching, So I don't need the 17th film in an action franchise. Give me that great little indie film that's going to move people and that'll live forever. And yeah. So if I write a book or do a film, whether it's a documentary or a scripted film, whatever the case may be, even on my Facebook page, I just pour my heart out. I don't care if somebody's pissed off. I'm just gonna speak my mind and that's it. So I know that's another long-winded answer, but create art, people. You don't need endless content. Those guys doing video, the guy has a six-pack of abs, the hot woman has the cleavage. Once they hit 30, they're done. They're done. Make a great movie 1,000 years from now, people will watch it. Seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Evan, thank you so much.
Thank
This has
you.
been
Thank you.
this has been captivating. Honestly, I've loved this time with you.
Appreciate it. Same here.
And like I say every week, I want to thank my producer Tyler because much like you, I am not tech savvy, and I couldn't do this without him. I sit here and talk to the people who come in, and in a lot of ways, it's their show more than it's mine. And Tyler helps me get it out there to the world. So Tyler, Martin, and Emity Studios, thank you so much. Thank you again to Evan Ginzburg, and we will see you guys next week with the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, Keith. And today, my guest is a singer-songwriter, an instrumentalist, an advocate for mental health, really just a super talented guy, and I'm really happy to have him here. Welcome from Canada, Vili V.
Hey, Keith. Hello. Hi, everybody. How you doing? Thanks for having me on the show.
Great to have you, man. I'm excited to do this. So before we get into anything else, I feel like I have to talk about your voice because it's so unique, man. Like, I spent this afternoon listening to your newest album, and first of all, like, you seems like you can genre hop pretty easily. Like, the style on this album is really like old school rock and roll. And then I've also heard you sing some
almost classical sounding stuff.
Okay.
But I think that what pulls it all together is just, man, you have one of the most unique, most beautiful voices that I've ever heard, to be completely honest. Your tone is just so rich, and man, I don't know if I've ever heard anyone sing like you. I was trying to think of comparisons and maybe a little bit of Roy Orbison, but honestly, man, it's you. Like, your voice is amazing.
Oh, thank you so
So
much. Appreciate
you're
that.
welcome. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. And the other thing is, obviously doing this podcast, like, we do deal with people who are on labels and major distribution and things like that. But for an independent artist, your production is so rich. Like, everything sounds so full. I mean, you're killing it, man. So
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
you're welcome.
we spend quite a bit of time on that, money wise and stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah,
for
because
sure.
I wanted to do it right, what I heard
Yeah,
in my mind, you know. So
awesome, man. Well, you definitely did, dude. I love it.
thank you so much.
So I guess where we're gonna start right now is from the beginning. Like, what made you? When did you realize that you wanted to create music and be like? When did you realize you were a creative person and that was going to be your direction?
Well, I think I first got interested in music from my parents' record collection. And on the weekends, they would always play all these different records, and I heard all these, you know, cool vintage artists. And I was like, oh wow, how did they do that? And it's like one day I want to, you know, do that. And I was just a little kid, right?
Right.
But before that, before I started to really sing, I was into art. So I do a lot of visual art, sketching, and ink stuff like stippling and that sort of thing, watercolors.
Oh,
Uh,
awesome.
so at one point I thought I was going to be an artist, but then um, music took over. So,
Sure, sure. And honestly, I've said this in past podcasts, but it does seem like when you're a creative person, sometimes it takes a little bit to find the direction. You know, you dabble in a few different things. Sometimes you're very serious about some of that stuff. And a lot of people continue to have multiple ventures. Is that where you are, or do you basically just focus on music now?
yeah, I'm just focusing on music, performances, recording, and then trying to, you know, help with different causes
Yeah.
um, with my music. So I'm
Okay.
actually doing a big concert, an album release for In Daddy's Arms Again
Awesome.
on September the 29th. And part of that is going to help an outreach called Serving Hands, because there's a lot of homelessness here in Hamilton, Southern Ontario, where I live. So we're just trying to help the community and
That's
bring it.
awesome, man.
Yeah, yeah,
That's awesome. So, so once you realized that you wanted to make music,
right.
um, how did you go about making that happen? Like, what'd you do from there? Did you pick up a guitar? Did you take singing lessons, or like how? Or
Well, I think my voice started to really come after I got my tonsils. I was about 12 years old, and I had these really horrible tonsils. They were diseased, so I had to get them out. I was about 12 years old. And so after I got them out, then my voice started to come. Like I could sing in falsetto. Before I couldn't, it was just cracking all the time. And uh, and then when I finally got to high school is when I really started. It was grade 11, I would say, and I sang for the high school talent contest. And you know, you never know how you're going to be received, right? So uh, I did a couple songs, and it was fantastic. I mean, the female attention afterwards was great. So I was like, oh wow, okay, I can do this. So it just started to snowball after that.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. Once you get on stage, like that first time,
Yeah,
especially if it goes well, but even if it doesn't, like the very first time I ever performed in front of people,
yeah,
I did comedy, and it was very, very bad. But but I wanted to figure out why it was bad and do something to get people to react to me the way that I wanted them to. So even with it being a bad experience, um, I still,
yeah.
you still go after it.
It's all a learning experience, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So once you did the talent show or the school performance, did you go out and try to find a band to play out and write some songs, or were you solo,
I think
strictly solo? Or
yeah, sorry.
okay.
Yeah, I tried to put together a band in high school, but it didn't last very long. So, people left to go to college and that sort of thing. But I knew I wanted to study music, so after I got out of high school, I went to college to study music, jazz and classical music.
Awesome.
Because I wanted to really write good songs, that was my goal. So then afterwards, I went to Mohawk College here in Hamilton, and I started to do competitions. And then from that is where people started, calling you for performances and that sort of thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the composition of your songs, it's accessible, but it's also complex. Like you have really cool time signature changes and things like that keep it interesting. But at the same time, I feel like you definitely make music that you could hear on the radio and people could get into. I think you've got a really good balance going there. So
Thank you so much. Yeah.
you're
Well,
welcome.
I also love the arranging aspect of it. So when you get in the studio, all the strings and all that kind of thing, if you have a song that calls for it, of course. But
Sure.
yeah, because I arrange all my songs, so all that stuff it's just so fulfilling,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you once you started performing out and kind of regularly working on music, when did you decide you wanted to go in and start recording stuff?
Well, I think I was doing it cheaply before the 2000s, just trying to get used to it and get my chops going in the studio. So I just do like cover songs with tracks and that sort of thing. And I was trying to write at the time too in college. But then when I got out of college, I started to write some of the songs that would be part of my first original album. So I recorded that in 2002, and I released it in 2003. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, this is something that's interesting to me because I grew up in upstate New York,
Okay.
and there's definitely a trickle down of artists from Canada. But I know that like bands like the Tragically Hip and even Gordon Lightfoot. Gordon Lightfoot really only had one big song in America, maybe one or two, but not, yeah, If You Could Read My Mind and The Wreck of Edmund Fitzgerald, those are pretty much but in Canada, I mean, he's an icon.
Yeah.
So as a Canadian artist, do you feel like it's challenging to get into the international market, or like how do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's become easier now with the internet.
Okay.
Yeah, because people will contact you from different parts of the world. Recently, I did a launch for the album, and I had a publicist, of course, and yeah, she sent it all around the world, and I had plays in South America, Europe, the States, a little bit Canada, Australia.
Okay.
Yeah, so
That's awesome.
I think it's just finding the right people to work with, the right team who share your vision, and then you can, do even more traveling because I've performed in Europe and in the States,
Okay.
in Canada, of course. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think the internet definitely helps. We talked a little bit about it. The way that I found you is I have a subscription to Spotify, and they will recommend. They'll be like, "We think you might like this artist," and you popped up. And I'm not sure why they thought I would like you, but they were correct. So there you go. And I'm not sure if I would have found your music otherwise, but I'm really glad I did. So
Yeah, and
it's
before
really cool.
you didn't have that before, right? So
Right.
you had to be on a label, either a major or an independent, to get known, and then you'd have to, do all these large tours and that sort of thing. So
Yeah. You kind of had to rely on almost lobbyists, to try to get your stuff on the radio here. That was really the only way.
Other than maybe, you know, Rush and a little bit of Triumph and stuff like that, MTV wasn't really playing a lot of Canadian bands during the
Yeah.
90s, like pre-internet, you know. So it was either you got on the radio or people didn't hear you. Like, to me, it's I want to go back to the Tragically Hip for just a second, because to me, they're one of my favorite bands personally.
Okay.
And to me, I mean, they were such a huge band. Everyone knew them in upstate New York, and obviously in Canada, they're like
Yeah.
practically the national band. And
Right.
then you mention them to people in America, and it's just like a lot of or other regions of the United States, I should say, other than upstate New York, and
Yeah.
yeah, people just don't even know who they are, and it was always so odd to me. I'm like, they're so good. Like, if you take Neil Young and Pearl Jam, you've got the Tragically Hip. You should really check them out. You know?
Yeah. But they're
But I'm
huge.
glad it's opening up more. You know, like I'm really glad.
Yeah,
'Cause,
I think it is. Yeah. I
yeah,
think.
because as a hip fan for over 30 years, I mean, it's like I
Oh
wish
wow.
they had the internet. You know, but they don't. They didn't.
Yeah,
So
I remember in the 90s it was everywhere, Tragically
yeah,
Hip. And they had
yeah,
all these
for sure.
stupid bands pop up, the Strictly Hip, and all these.
Right,
And
and then
they have high school talent shows too. Like in the cafeteria, they play. I guess the school would hire tribute bands,
yeah,
and yeah, so
and
it's
they were Tragically Hip tribute bands. That's
yeah,
man. Yeah, and
yeah.
then they come down here and it's like, you know, they're lucky to play a bar. Like, it's just crazy.
I know, yeah,
It's just crazy. But
yeah.
but hopefully that divide is closing, you know, really. Like um
I hope so. Yeah, I think so.
yeah. So are some challenges that you faced in your career that maybe made you reconsider what you were doing or push you forward, either way?
Well, in the beginning there, when I released my original album, it was called Indigo Blue, 2003. Um, I was trying to, get a record deal at the time because that was the thing to do.
Right.
And I tried to get a manager, so I worked with somebody. He got me on a television show, and I did some spots and that sort of thing. Uh, and then he got me a distribution deal with EMI Music Canada with an independent subsidiary called Sextant Records. They're not around anymore. And but that didn't go anywhere. They didn't put anything behind it. I guess they were just wanting me to do all the work and they would reap all the benefits.
Jeez.
So yeah, so like, oh, Billy, we didn't have a lot of sales and all that kind of, how I was on the
Yeah.
phone with them. So it was interesting. So the most that I sold was just from doing my concerts. People would buy it there, CDs. So that's how I would do it when I went around and performed. So I always had a hard time finding the right people to work with, and then you had a lot of closed doors. Uh, yeah, it's great, but we're not interested right now, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't fit this or doesn't fit that. And at that time, I didn't know what to call my music either, right? So that wasn't helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I think like especially when we were relying on radio formats,
yeah,
um, you had to have a name. You had to have what are you doing? You know, tell us what we sell you as, you know what I mean? Kind of thing. And if you couldn't really come up with that, it didn't help, you know.
yeah. Something that would encapsulate everything that you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a lot to ask an artist, you know, as a creative person. Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're a metal band, you probably know you're a metal band, but if you're just making good music that feels good to you, that you want to get out, like,
Yeah,
what do you call that? You know, it's just me. Like, so it's an
yeah.
interesting.
I think it was just rock pop at the time, but
Right, sure.
it's more influenced by the 20th century music,
Right,
mid and
right.
yeah, that sort of thing. So,
Absolutely. So once you so basically, I mean, even though you were on a label, you were almost an independent artist anyway, you know, like if you were selling most of the albums at your own concerts, you know, you were putting in the legwork, and
oh
that's
yeah,
kind of yeah. So
that
did that kind of make the light bulb go off that you might as well just go off on your own and
and run with this thing, or?
Well, I kept trying. I mean, I was contacting people, agents, da da da. So I work with some people, but I always got sucked into doing cover songs because
Hmm.
that, that's what people wanted you to do. And then tributes. So they want, because that's what people know, right?
Right, right.
So I did, I mean, I did all kinds of stuff. Elvis, Roy Orbison. I was a part of the Bee Gees tribute. We played
Oh
with
wow.
the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra in Winnipeg, in
Oh
Manitoba.
wow.
So it was just stuff like that. It was crazy. But that's all fine. I love the music, but it's not you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're not
yeah.
expressing yourself. So
Yeah,
so
on our first episode, I talked to Kickstand Jenny. Uh, they're they're a hard rock band from down here, but
okay.
like they're based out of Florida, I believe. But we talked about how if you want to do covers, you can play covers forever, and you can make good money, and you're always going to get a booking. But how satisfying is it? Like you got if especially if you have your own voice. Like I'm sure that there's plenty of people who love these songs and they want to interpret them, and that's what they do, and that satisfies them. But if you
Mhm.
feel like you have your own voice, I mean, you want people to hear that. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's a
And your thought and the thoughts that you've been given and how you want to put together music and all that kind
yeah,
of thing. And you just want people to enjoy it, It's
right.
you want to touch the
So
people's hearts to listen to your stuff.
yeah, so you do the arrangements on your songs as far as the production and the engineering and stuff. How much of a hand do you have in that sort of stuff?
Well, I'm not an engineer, so I worked with a guy named Darius Chipaniak. He's with a studio called Phase One in Toronto, and they've recorded like Anne Murray, Andre Bocelli, all these big acts, and they did something on the Thriller album because they have it up on the wall, so they must have done something
Yeah,
mastered or something. I don't know what they did,
right.
but it's a really great studio, and he's worked with some of the top Canadian acts and around the world and stuff, and he's fantastic. So I was fortunate to find him, and so engineering wise, that's my man.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Good deal.
yeah.
So now I saw on your website like there's some stuff about mental health awareness, and you talked about doing the album release to benefit the homeless people in your area. Like,
Yeah.
what is it that got you involved in helping and helping with these different causes and being an activist as well as a musician?
Well, so this is going back to all the trials and tribulations you face when you're trying to find your way in music and life. And eventually, over time, I developed a really bad anxiety issue. Uh,
Sure.
I think it was back in 2016, I started to have really bad panic attacks, which I'd never had before. And I had to go to the hospital like 3 times. I thought I was having a heart attack.
Yeah,
And
I've been
oh,
there.
fine, here's an Ativan, go home.
Yeah, yeah,
So, and it was so bad, it got so bad, I couldn't leave my house. So I was like, oh, um, and then eventually I had some personal things that happened to me, tragedies, you might say, people
yeah,
died and that sort of thing. And so it's just been the last, I would say about 5, 6 years, I've just been healing and, getting back to what I was before and hopefully better. And so that's why I wanted to get into helping with the homeless because I know I see it all the time in my city. And part of homelessness is mental health issues. So I understand that, right? Uh, so that's why I started to get into it.
yeah.
And
I mean, I
now,
personally. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. So now I felt it was the right time to do it because I had been writing all these songs at the time when I was sick too. So all these songs are from the last, I don't know, I would say 10, 15 years. And so it just kind of encapsulates my journey. So I
Yeah,
felt it's a good time to, to release the album and then also help those who need help.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I can relate to that sort of stuff. Like, I have actually been homeless 2 or 3 times, 3 times, yeah, from childhood up until like my early 20s,
Okay.
um, early 30s, and I struggled with mental health for most of my life. So one of the I'm on really good medicine now, so I'm doing a lot better. But
Yeah.
but
Thank you.
one of the that's one of the things, like, that I do look for when I'm looking for people to put on the podcast. Like, if they have a strong message about mental health or community, things like that, I look for artists like that, because I think that that stuff can go hand in hand with music, and it's important to, you know, to just let people know, that there's people out there who care and who are working to help. So
Yeah, because the problem is very bad right now. It's just gotten worse and
yeah.
worse, worse and worse. And I don't see a lot of change. Like nobody's really doing anything. I mean, there's groups that go, like there's a group downtown and they feed about 1,000 people every Saturday.
Wow.
Just line up and they're, you know, giving out food and that sort of thing. They're a Christian organization. And
Awesome.
yeah, so yeah, it's very bad. So I just wanted to do my part and hopefully in a small way it can, start something to help some sort of change, get people back on their feet because it's not just giving them food or whatever. You want to help them so that they can then, find housing and that sort of thing, get a job. Yeah. Because that's all part of the, self-esteem and everything.
So I live in kind of like a small town in southern Indiana. It's not where I'm from, but it's where I'm living right now.
Okay.
And I did not realize what kind of a homeless situation there was here until I got a job as a cashier overnight at a gas station. And it's
Oh,
basically the only place open 24 hours. And the amount of homeless people who came into the store at night while I was working, I was just shocked. And they're kind of right now sort of focusing on that stuff locally. There's a place called the Connection Cafe that helps out in the winter and feeds people and stuff like that. But I feel like, unfortunately, in a lot of ways, stuff like that is still hidden, because I never just from being out in the community and talking to people and seeing how things are presented, I never would have known that there's this many homeless people in this town. And I think that anything that brings awareness to stuff like that is a positive thing. So
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's everywhere.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And it's just growing. It's not getting smaller. So you have to do something or else what's going to happen, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with your struggles with anxiety and your struggles with finding the right people to work with and sort of in a way kind of being pushed aside by the record label that was supposed to help you, um, what is it that keeps you creating? What is it that keeps you wanting to get this stuff out there to people?
Well, I feel that God has asked me to, use my talent to help others. So that's one of the things that really pushes me forward. And I just love music. I mean, I mean, when you're writing songs, whether it's at the piano or on guitar or whatever, it's, time just passes by if you're writing something. Hours will go by and it's just like you're in a different world. So it's a wonderful, it brings you happiness, when you sing, you release all that stress out of your body and then you share that with others and they connecting with it. It's like nothing else,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you mentioned God, and
Yeah.
I how important is your faith in your everyday life and in your music? because I noticed in some of the writings that I was reading about you, there's definitely a connection between your faith and your music. So
I think it's the most important. That's why I'm here. I mean, God healed me. I asked for it, and he healed me. Yeah, and I'm still taking some medication because you know you have after things that are happening, but it's so much different now. Like I'm way more relaxed, and with stressful situations, I can handle them better, and my inside body is not freaking out on me. So it's a blessing. You know?
that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. Honestly, thank you for sharing that. That's because I'm sort of on a journey right now with spirituality. I'm I've seen some things lately that have helped me. I don't want to get too much into it. I guess I don't know. Maybe I do, but but I had sort of strayed from the path for a while. I kind of decided that I was an atheist. Like I just decided that God didn't exist, and then we randomly came across some missionaries, and they've been coming and praying with me, and
Oh, wow.
just in the last couple weeks, like things have been different, like noticeably different, and I mean, I think it's God. So
Yeah, you're
I went,
lighter. You're lighter
yeah,
now.
and not just that, but there's been improvements in my life that I can't really explain, you
Mm.
know. So I went from someone who was like, it doesn't make sense, there is no God, to
Right.
within him, and I was pretty religious before that, but to being, I guess I'm a believer again, you know.
Fantastic. That's
After
amazing.
5 years, of going in a different direction. So God
Yeah,
puts things there for you, he really does. So
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it's
The way, the truth, and the life. And it just, he says, take my yoke up, give it to him. And then and that doesn't mean you don't do the work or anything. It's just that you got somebody who's there for you and helping you, somebody
yeah,
great.
he
So,
shares in the burden, which is what we all need.
yeah, because the world says that you can do it on your own. You're a god. But that's not what the Bible says. It says
Right.
we're not gods. He is. So it's total different opposite to what the world tells you. You know, the new
Yeah.
age, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So honestly, this has been a really cool conversation, man. It's been real relaxed and I've enjoyed it. Like I said, if people haven't heard you, you're on Spotify. You have several releases on Spotify. Um, you're on the web. You've got a website where people can get to know you, but your voice, man. I just
I'm
I was I don't know how that comes across, me saying that repeatedly, but I've legitimately never heard anyone who sings like you, and it's impressive, and
thank
I
you.
really enjoy it. So,
You're nice
um,
of you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
oh, you're welcome. And before we hop off, if there's anything you wanna say before we go, any message you want to leave, where can we find you? Um, where can
Well,
we get your music? Yeah, that kind of stuff.
so my website is vilimusic.com. So it's VILI music.com, one L. And from there, you can go to my Shopify store, and there's the different CDs, as you mentioned, and digital downloads and other stuff, mugs and T-shirts and stuff like that. And I just want to mention one more time the concert. So if anybody is in this area, maybe northern New York State or southern Ontario, we're doing the concert on September the 29th at the Really Living Center. And that is also on my website. So you can find more about that there, find the link to get tickets and that sort of thing. So,
All right, awesome. Well, I want to thank Vili V for coming on, and I want to thank, as always, Tyler Martin and Emily Studios, my producer. couldn't do this without you, man. Thanks for making us look and sound good. Please be sure to check out Vili V. If you're local, check out a show. If you're not local, check him out on the internet. He's an amazing artist with a great message. And we will see you all next week on the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast.